Good evening. This is the May 27, 2026 meeting of the San Francisco County Transportation Authority Community Advisory Committee, or CAC. I'm Kat Siegel, chair of the CAC. Our vice chair is Naj Daniels. I'd like to thank our clerk, Amy Sayung, and our operator, Brittany Chan, for this meeting. Madam Clerk, please do a roll call to ensure we have quorum, and then please read your announcement about public comment.
CAC members, when I call your name, please say present to ensure quorum. Member Bars absent. Member Baumgarten present. Vice Chair Daniels absent. Member Ford present. Member Kim absent. Member Labaro absent. Member Levine present. Member Margarita absent. Member Milford Rosales present. Member Ortega present. Chair Siegel present. Chair, we have quorum. Also, public comment will be available for each item on this agenda via telephone by calling one of the numbers listed on the front of the agenda or joining the meeting through the Zoom link. Once you join, you will be able to listen to the meeting as a participant. To make public comment on an item when the item is called, members of the public participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature or dial *9. Do not press *9 again or you will be removed from the queue. When you are asked to unmute yourself, press *6 or the unmute button to unmute yourself. The live operator will advise that you are allowed 2 minutes to speak. When your 2 minutes are up, we will move on to the next caller. Best practices are to speak slowly, clearly, and turn down the volume of any televisions or radios around you. Thank you. That concludes my announcement.
Thank you so much. We'll move on to the chair's report. Thank you to Amy Sayung for sending the CAC the executive director's report after the May 19th board meeting. The report is available on the agency's website at www.sfcta.org. From the report, I'd like to note that there is quite a lot of legislative activity at both the state and federal levels this time of year. At the state level, May 15 marked the last day for fiscal committees in the state legislature to hear and report bills to the chamber floor ahead of the May 29 deadline for bills to pass out of the House of Origin. We have the latest status on bills for which the Transportation Authority took a position or was watching on item 6 on the consent agenda. All the bills on which the Transportation Authority took a position have advanced through the legislative process and are expected to be considered in the next chamber, except for Senate Bill 2276, also known as the Stop Super Speeders Act, which died in committee amidst concerns from organizations such as the American Civil Liberties Union and the California Public Defenders Association, as well as concerns about the bill's fiscal impact on the motor vehicle account, which has bordered on insolvency in recent years. Also, Senate Bill 1411, which was on our watch list and would have authorized spending of cap and invest revenues outside of the Merced-Bakersfield high-speed rail segment, also died in committee. If time permits, I request that staff present a comprehensive state legislative update along with relevant federal updates at next month's CAC meeting. I'd also like to welcome Clara Baumgarten and Diana Labaro as our newest CAC members representing District 3 and District 11 respectively. Clara, would you like to say a few words to introduce yourself to the CAC?
I think I pressed the button. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, it is. I'm so pleased and honored to be here. My name is Clara Baumgarten. I've lived in San Francisco for just about 7 years, and I've lived in District 3 and worked in District 3 all that time. I love it here, and I've always been enthusiastic about transit and being involved in my community, and so I look forward to contributing for this committee.
Thank you and welcome, Clara. And I believe Diana is not able to make it tonight, but we'll look forward to welcoming her at our next meeting. We have a substantial agenda this evening with a lot of high interest items, so I'd ask members to limit questions to 2 so that we can ensure that everyone has a chance to speak, and request staff to be concise in responses to member questions. Moving on to meeting management, CAC members, if you'd like to speak, you can indicate so by standing your name card on its end so it's pointing up. When I call on you to speak, please press the red star sticker on the base of the microphone to turn it on. A red light below the mouthpiece indicates that the microphone is on. Kindly turn off the microphone when done speaking by pressing the red star again. CAC members, staff, and public commenters in the room, please be sure to speak directly into the microphone so folks attending virtually can hear you. CAC members and folks in the hearing room, please turn off or silence all electronic devices and computer notifications during the meeting. That's it for announcements. Are there any questions or comments from CAC members on the chair's report? Not seeing any. Is there anyone in the hearing room wishing to give public comment on the chair's report? Not seeing any. Operator, is there any remote public comment on the chair's report?
There is no remote public comment.
Great, thank you. Then we'll move on to the consent agenda. Items 3 through 6 comprise the consent agenda. Staff is not planning to present, but is available to answer questions. Do any CAC members have any questions or comments on the consent agenda? Member Milford Rosales.
I would just like to second Chairperson Siegel's request for a more comprehensive presentation on the state and federal legislature, just the status of the bills and positions that we're supporting next month, if possible, because very hectic trying to keep up the last few weeks, and even reading through this, it's probably not going to be anything they could present today wouldn't be set in stone or maybe even relevant next month with how fast things are moving.
All right, is there anyone in the hearing room wishing to give public comment on the consent agenda?
Yes, Edward Mason. On the consent agenda is the item for electric bicycles. I would hope that in the future there would be legislation to license these vehicles, whether they be bicycles or motorized electric vehicles. It's becoming an inherent problem in the community. You've got them riding on the sidewalk, and they zip out into the traffic lane, then they're back up on the sidewalk. They come from behind you. It's a real safety issue, and I would hope that either locally or regionally or statewide that we do something about this to control it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Is there any remote public comment on the consent agenda?
There is no remote public comment.
Great. May I have a motion and a second to approve items 3 and 4 on the consent agenda? Moved by Vice Chair Daniels, seconded by Member Milford Rosales. Madam Clerk, would you please take a roll call vote?
On the motion to approve items 3 and 4 on the consent agenda, Member Bors absent. Member Baumgarten?
Aye.
Baumgarten, aye. Vice Chair Daniels?
Daniels, aye.
Daniels, aye. Member Ford?
Ford, aye.
Ford, aye. Member Kim? Kim, absent. Member Laboro, absent. Member Levine?
Levine, aye.
Levine, aye. Member Margarita abstains on the consent agenda. Okay. Margarita, aye. Member Milford Rosales?
Milford Rosales, aye.
Milford Rosales, aye. Member Ortega?
Ortega, aye.
Ortega, aye. Chair Siegel?
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, aye. There are 8. Just a moment. There are 8 ayes. The motion, the consent agenda is approved.
Great, thank you so much. And we're going to take one item out of order tonight. We're going to go to item 10 on our agenda, which is adopt a motion of support to adopt the proposed fiscal year 2026-2027 budget and work program. Our presentation will be delivered by Finance Manager Lily Yu. Welcome, Ms. Yu, and thank you for joining us.
Good evening, Chair Siegel and CAC members. Lily Yu, Finance Manager. Today, I'm here to present our proposed annual budget and work program for fiscal year 2026-2027. Last month, I presented the preliminary fiscal year 26-27 budget and work program as an information item, and this month we are seeking a motion of support to adopt the proposed fiscal year 2026-27 budget and work program. Thank you. I'll speak louder. Thanks. Since the preliminary budget and work program was presented last month, we have revised the proposed budget to reflect updates to the Congestion Management Agency and the Treasure Island Mobility Management Agency programs. Under the Congestion Management Agency programs, we've secured an additional $0.4 million in regional program revenues from the Bay Area Toll Authority, or BATA, funding in May 2026 for the Bimla Reinhardt Vista Point, or Pier E2 project on Yerba Buena Island. The additional funding will allow soil mediation of contaminants left over from the construction of the east span of the Bay Bridge, and it will also cover removal of contaminated soils from previous naval operations on the site. The proposed budget also reflects a corresponding increase of $2.4 million in capital project costs. In addition, the proposed construction contract amendment is included on today's consent agenda. Under the TIMA program, we've secured an additional $167,000 in regional program revenues from the Treasure Island Community Development Operating Subsidy to expand communications efforts for various TIMA projects. TIMA will develop a communications and engagement strategy and work with Treasure Island Development Authority to foster strong connections with the community and ensure their feedback will help shape the continuation of the program. The TIMA budget and work program will be presented as a separate item to the TIMA committee on June 16th and agendized for adoption at the June 23rd TIMA board meeting. Other than these two changes, there have been no other changes. As a result of these changes, we are anticipating total revenues of $194.5 million, total expenditures of $251.6 million, and still the need to borrow $60 million from our revolving credit agreement with U.S. Bank. Anytime we do borrow funds, we'll come back to the CAC and board to seek approval on how we plan to spend these funds. This concludes the briefing of the proposed budget. I'm happy to go over any questions or go over the full budget presentation, which will take about 12 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Any questions or comments from members or requests to see the whole budget presentation? Great. Not seeing any. Is there any public comment in the room on this item?
Edward Mason. For agenda item 10 on page 179, we have to monitor the AV implementation. My standpoint, this is the AVs are operating in the public space as an R&D lab, and I saw 10 Waymos lined up in Millbrae Monday, and I was wondering what they were doing. But the point is that there should be I would recommend a fee for these AVs instead of the public having to pay for this. On page 186 is a micro-mobility for downtown movement with bicycles. Strongly recommend that technology be considered with autonomous vehicles of some sort. and internet loading zones with a reservation system, because the program says with bicycles, but demographically, where are these people going to be? Because I don't think that they are being born to be on the bicycles now. And the regional express bus system to eliminate possibly the commuter buses, because in the Wayback Machine, we had Greyhound, Peerless, and East Shore lines acting as the regional express bus system. So I'm very happy to see that this is being reconstituted. And I wish that the regional express bus system all the success. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your comment. Operator, is there any remote public comment on this item?
Checking for remote public comment on item 10. There is no public comment.
Great. May I have a motion and a second to approve item 10? Moved by Member Levine. Seconded by Vice Chair Daniels. Madam Clerk, would you please take a roll call vote?
On the motion to approve item 10, Member Bars absent. Member Baumgarten?
Baumgarten, aye.
Baumgarten, aye. Vice Chair Daniels?
Daniels, aye.
Daniels, aye. Member Ford?
Ford, aye.
Ford, aye. Member Kim? Kim, absent. Member Labaro? Labaro, absent. Member Levine?
Levine, aye.
Levine, aye. Member Margarita?
Margarita, aye.
Margarita, aye. Member Milford Rosales?
Milford Rosales, aye.
Milford Rosales, aye. Member Ortega?
Ortega, aye.
Ortega, aye. Chair Siegel?
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, aye. There are 8 ayes. The motion is approved.
Great. Thank you so much. We'll move on to item 7, adopt a motion of support to adopt the Inner Sunset Transportation Study final report. And we have a presentation from Principal Transportation Planner Andrew Heidel. Welcome, Mr. Heidel.
All right. Good evening, Chair and members. Again, Andrew Heidel, Principal Planner at the Transportation Authority, to present this item. So the Inner Sunset Transportation Study was requested by Board Chair and District 7 Supervisor Myrna Melgar with the objective of describing and addressing transportation safety and circulation issues in the Inner Sunset Commercial Core. Our study area for this work was fairly small, encompassing the area from Judah Street on the south to Lincoln Way on the north, 5th Avenue on the east out to 12th Avenue on the west. The study was focused on leveraging existing transportation data combined with field observation and input from community residents, visitors, and business owners to identify key issues and to understand proposed solutions in 3 broad timeframes. We'll come back to this in a bit. Near term, or solutions that are implementable in 1 to 2 years. Midterm, or implementable in the next 2 to 5 years, though likely requiring additional design and community outreach. Or long-term, which would be recommendations that require additional study, design, outreach, and would expect to be implemented in more than 5 years. The team for this work included an integrated staff team from the Transportation Authority and SFMTA with the support of technical consultants. It was funded by the Transportation Authority's Neighborhood Transportation Program. After a review of the existing conditions data and preliminary identification of key issues in the study area, the team proposed a set of 4 goals for this work. These goals were presented as draft to community stakeholders during the first round of outreach and received strong support. Each study recommendation, which I'll describe shortly, advances 1 or more of these goals. The goals include, up there on the screen, these are not prioritized, so not in any particular order, but overall, prioritizing safety for vulnerable road users, improving transit reliability, enhancing access to key destinations, and supporting the economic vitality of the neighborhood. The study included 2 rounds of community outreach to hear feedback from members of the public and understand the issues that people face. The topic of our first round of outreach, as well as their support for draft concepts that we proposed, which was the focus of the second round. In each round of outreach, the study team sought to ensure that the online materials closely matched those we presented in person so that those who couldn't attend could receive the same information and have the same opportunity to provide input. Normally, all of our online materials were presented in English, Spanish, and Chinese. Live interpretation in these same languages was also provided at the town hall events. During the second round of outreach, the team conducted 3 pop-up events, including at the Inner Sunset Flea Market, transit stop at the corner of 9th and Lincoln, and a Chinese language pop-up at the 22nd and Irving Market. While this last location was a bit outside the study area, we still had a great response rate, over 50 people stopping by to discuss the study. Our town hall events were also well attended with about 100 attendees each, and the online surveys were also effective. In round 1, we received over 1,800 replies. We also want to recognize a recent crash in the study area, which unfortunately occurred at the same time that the study team was preparing the documentation for our final report. March 6th, a person riding a bicycle westbound on Irving Street, just west of 7th Avenue, was struck by a large truck while navigating around a delivery vehicle. While the exact causes and events of the crash remain under investigation, the study team conducted a thorough review of the draft concepts based on our initial understanding and either refined or advanced the timeline of some recommendations pertaining to parking and curb management, opportunities to create more public space on Irving Street, and bicycle safety in the area. I'll note which ones those are as we go through the recommendations in the next section. Recognizing that we have a full agenda, I'll cover the recommendations very briefly in this presentation, but happy to answer questions as a follow-up if desired. So the study has 4 near-term recommendations, one of which was moved forwards from a medium-term recommendation in response to the crash in March. Through these, the first, making it easier for drivers to see people walking and rolling, and vice versa. Also implementing painted safety zones, continental crosswalks, and advanced limit lines at intersections throughout the study area. This recommendation received support of 85% of town hall and survey respondents. Updating driving directions in map apps involves partnering with online mapping companies to indicate preferred routes for drivers that can reduce congestion and safety conflicts, including to popular tourist destinations in Golden Gate Park. Received support from 75% of town hall and survey responses. Consolidating transit stops for more reliable service involves consolidating some bus stops for the 643 buses on Judah Street between 5th and 7th Avenue to reduce travel time variability on those routes. This improvement received support from about 65% of our town hall attendees and survey respondents, though worth noting we did receive specific concerns from individuals who both live near the proposed or existing stops, expressing concern or opposition to the change. And finally, an upgraded 7th Avenue bike lane on 7th Avenue between Judah and Lincoln Way. Implement a painted Class 2 bike lane on these 2 blocks. These 2 blocks are identified in SFMTA's biking and rolling plan as part of the city's North Star network. And this improvement received support from nearly 60% of town hall and survey respondents. Implementation of this concept is the subject of a separate funding request on the same agenda tonight. That recommendation, excuse me, let me go back. The upgraded 7th Avenue bike lane was a concept that was described as a midterm concept during the second round of public outreach, but was advanced forward following our recent revisiting or checking of the recommendations. Study has 3 midterm recommendations, again, one of which was moved forward from a long-term recommendation in response. First being more reliable and Judah, which involves improvements to existing signals, the addition of a new signal at 10th Avenue and Judah Street, expanded sidewalk space at 9th Avenue and Judah to prevent vehicles from blocking the trackway. These improvements would be further advanced as part of the Judah Transit and Safety Project led by SFMTA and currently underway. These received support from over 75% of town hall and survey responses. Second, a more reliable 7 Haight Noriega bus route involves implementing a part-time bus-only lane in the current part-time tow-away lane on westbound Lincoln Way, and constructing bus bulbs for eastbound passengers at the 5th Avenue and 9th Avenue stops on Lincoln. This improvement received support from over 65% on these. And our last one here was also moved up from long-term to midterm, is this closing the gap in bicycle facilities from 7th Avenue to Lot. So in our near-term recommendation, we have painting the Class 2 bike lane on 7th Avenue. This is paired with that recommendation, but will take a bit more time. Also the subject of the same funding request I mentioned earlier in our later agenda item. It's to conduct a study of the best route for a low-stress, low-conflict bicycle route through that gap in bicycle facilities. We'll examine options on 5th, 6th, and 7th Avenues to make this connection, including additional data collection, community engagement, and outreach, perhaps identifying some quick build and longer-term improvements. The study received support from 70% of all in survey respondents. Finally, 2 long-term recommendations, one of which was expanded in scope in response to public feedback as well as the March. First is to conduct a follow-up study to improve parking access and demand management. So better match the use of the curb in the neighborhood with user needs and explore solutions to help manage parking demand, including from customers, deliveries, and employees. Improvement received support from nearly 65% of them. Finally, conduct a follow-up study to identify opportunities for more public space on Irving Street. Work in collaboration with Inter-Sunset merchants, the Department of Public Works, and other stakeholders to advance options to improve public space, increase safety, and prevent double parking along the Judah on Irving Street between 5th and 9th Avenue. In the public outreach, this was between just 8th and 9th Avenues, but we've expanded it to the full 4 blocks of Irving Street. The smaller recommendation, focused only between 8th and 9th, received support from about 70% of respondents. But touching briefly on next steps for these recommendations before I conclude, as I mentioned, 2 of the recommendations are subject of a funding request on the item, both related to improvements to bicycle facilities and better connecting Golden Gate Park. 2 additional concepts, the traffic directions and stop consolidations, are either low or no cost and can be handled as part of regular business or route adjustments by SFMTA. The remaining recommendations will require additional funding, potentially from a variety of sources, many of which are competitive, are described in more detail in the final report. That concludes my presentation. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Are there any questions or comments from members on this item? Member, I'll go to Member Baumgarten's card first.
Thank you, Member Baumgarten. I was just hoping if, this is my first time meeting, hopefully this is an okay question, but that last thing you mentioned, that there are other competing items for budget, is that is that a later down the line topic, or is that for this current budget?
So rather the other way around. So we have this set of recommendations and we identified a set of potential funding sources that these projects either stand alone or potentially combined with a larger project. Like I mentioned, some of them may get folded into the larger Judah project that SFMTA is working. Those funding sources that we have identified are competitive. So we don't necessarily manage or select them, but we can provide an application into them and we'll compete against other potential projects that are also eligible, but we need to make our case as part of that application. So we both have to wait for the call for projects or invitation for the application to be open and then put forward an application into that.
Got it. Thank you.
Member Ortega?
Hello. Thank you for your presentation. I remember from many presentations ago now, I can't remember when, we had a whole conversation about loading zones and like implementing something more similar to New York City with loading zones, and I'm curious if that came up at all in the conversations with the long-term parking, because it would allow the businesses to potentially have like parking for businesses in the evening, which I know is a concern of a lot of small-town business owners, but allow for proper loading in the mornings and get rid of some of the parking. So I was just curious if that concept also came up.
Yeah, thanks for the question. It did, and the intent is to address some of that in that parking study. So as you likely know, there are some yellow zones in the neighborhood today, which are commercial loading, that become general parking after 6 p.m. But there is an opportunity to, I think as you're suggesting, more closely tailor that to the needs of businesses of when deliveries might happen versus when customers or the thing we've seen in the neighborhood, particularly post-COVID, is just explosion in food delivery and TNC traffic. So thinking about how to match those demands on the curb better with what is available, because the last time SFMTA took a look at it was in 2019, which was sort of before that.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And can I just get an understanding that why is that like a 5-year long thing as a study? I'm curious if there's something else that I'm missing in that study about why it would take 5 years to do a study about herbs.
Yeah, I think two parts to answer that question. One is the intent is not to describe the 5 years as 5 years is what it will take to do just the study, but rather 5 years until someone might see changes on the street. But understanding your question, that is still a long period of time. It's a bit of budget availability, staff availability, and making sure those things will match up.
Great, thank you so much. That's my 2 questions, Chair.
Member Bars?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Sorry I was late. I want to follow up on the question about Member Ortega's question about the timing of these improvements. This is my district, right? District 7, and I have spoken to members of the Inner Sunset Neighbors Association. I've spoken to members of the Merchants Association, and I have to say many of them really applaud the outreach work. So thank you for that. But I will say one of the problems that I have heard I've heard 2 themes in like my engagement with my neighbors. And one is that the parking and double parking problems are urgent to be solved now. And so seeing them that come as a long-term recommendation is a bit disappointing. My second comment is that the other theme that I've heard, and I think actually is well represented in the recommendations, is just about safety and traffic safety in the neighborhood. And so I'm particularly happy to see some of the near-term recommendations, and with the explanation that 1 to 2 years is about when we see changes on the ground as opposed to like when the next item comes here. This is really good work. But I don't believe that the Class 2 bike lane on 7th Avenue is justifiable given the recent collision and the auto speeds and volumes on 7th Ave. I struggle with that. And I guess I would like to see that come out as a stronger theme and justification for more action. So for example, like the closing the gap in bicycle facilities from 7th Avenue and Lawton to Golden Gate Park taking 2 to 5 years. I do struggle with this. And I think that, you know, one bit of feedback that I heard from, again, some of my neighbors and constituents is that maybe a really smart solution would not be to have the bike lane on 7th Avenue at all and to reconnect auto traffic off, like between Lincoln and 7th Avenue, and thus take some of the pressure off of Irving, which is where we've had a couple of collisions. So it's that kind of level of thinking that I was hoping to see and hoping to see more follow-up for. So at any rate, I did want to say those comments. However, I did really want to applaud the level of engagement that you have done with very limited bandwidth with the District 7 community, with myself. So thank you very much for doing so. Less of a question, more of a comment there. Member Milford Rosales.
Thank you very much for your presentation. One of the items I was very interested in seeing here was working with software companies that provide mapping services to reroute traffic or traffic recommendations appropriately. I myself don't own a car and don't drive, but I know like my younger brother does, and he could not find his way around the small middle American city he's lived in for 5 years without his app. And this just makes me wonder, are there factors or reasons that we haven't seen this solution pulled up in other spaces? Because we've had other items where we're going back and forth about speed bumps and closed street programs and infrastructure, and as important as infrastructure is, if this is a no-cost solution, as you mentioned in the presentation, which I didn't realize reading ahead of time, is there a way that we can suggest this or a policy around it that we could have advocates point to for other areas where traffic studies are going on?
I'll start with an answer, and then I'll invite my colleague, Long, who's on the line, I believe, from SFMTA, to sort of speak to their under-the-hood process here. I think I have personally encountered it in the past where on a prior neighborhood study, we were considering whether to implement right turn restrictions at what was fundamentally a four-way stop, and there was a lot of doubt of whether folks would actually obey that right turn restriction. But the effectiveness was actually getting it into the mapping apps. So mapping apps were no longer routing people and asking them to take that right turn. This is a little bit different. This is actually engaging with folks, or with the folks at the mapping company. The idea here, the sort of one we used in the example in the longer slide deck, is folks that are going or are north of the park, for example, and asked to go to the Cal Academy of Sciences. And if you do that today, the mapping app assumes that you want to go to the curb right in front of the Cal Academy of Sciences. And the only way to get there, because of JFK Promenade, is to go all the way around through the Inner Sunset and back north. If you're actually going there to park in the Music Concourse Garage, you can just go in at 10th and Fulton. And so the example we've been using is if you put in San Francisco Airport as a destination, for example, it will ask you, what terminal are you going to? Do you want to go to long-term parking, short-term parking, rental car, whatever? So trying to implement that step in there to get a little more specificity to ask people where they're going. Because if people are taking that long route all the way around, whether from the Richmond or Marin or whatever, they're adding a lot of congestion to the Inner Sunset and MLK Drive just to still go down to the Music Concourse parking garage, for example. So trying to change some of that thinking on the margins. I think it's a little more difficult to just say, hey, this block not preferred versus this block. I think the companies don't, but Jean, if you have anything to
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm Jean Long. I'm a transportation planner at SFMTA and work closely with Andy and his team on the Inner Sunset study. And just to add a bit of context, the reason why we looked at navigation companies as one strategy is because we did notice, as Andy was alluding to, that there's a lot of traffic being routed through night to get into the academy, even from, coming from the northern parts of the Bay Area. So we at SFMTA have contacts with navigation companies, but this is not a panacea. It's not a straight, solution. There are variables, and navigation companies have algorithms to kind of, weigh all the different travel options. But as Andy was saying, we can have that conversation with those navigation companies to help, I would say, diffuse some of the traffic instead of bottlenecking everything to 9th Avenue. So I hope that provides a little bit more, rationale as to why we recommended it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I do have a couple comments and questions. I had similar initial reaction to this study that member Bars did, and I know I've expressed that to you directly already. I am not, this is not my district, but I do walk or take transit in this corridor every day, and this is an area that I'd really love to see bigger, more ambitious thinking in improving, particularly the transit reliability and safety, and especially just Irving Street between 9th and 7th. I struggle to think of another surface portion of the N that is blocked by double parked vehicles more often. It's definitely a huge reliability impact to the to the end Judah, and then the double parked both PNC and delivery vehicles, as well as just like giant delivery trucks that double park on the tracks on that stretch. Makes it, I just don't bike there. It's not on my mental bike map because I've seen too many people suddenly have to veer into the track area because of a double parked car. So that is a really unfortunate gap there in that network. So I have two questions. One is, I know that there's an ongoing NJUDA reliability and safety survey that the SFCTA is conducting, which seems very related to some of the findings here. Between those two studies, do you think it is possible that we could see some more ambitious recommendations come forward to physically prevent cars and trucks from interfering with the NJUDA?
And I'll start off with this one and then ask Jean to speak to the NJUDA transit and safety effort. So I think consideration of changes to the cross section, and I think you've hit on a good point that as we sort of did our observations early on in the study, regulations and paint don't necessarily do a whole lot with respect to double parking in the neighborhood. And I think, Member Bars, you raised this as well, of there's a lot of delivery activity, as we've talked about before with Member Ortega's question, and there's a lot of pressure on the curb. So people fit in where they can, regardless of what regulations on the sign or even the crosshatch painted might be. And I think throughout some of the recommendations in both the medium and long term, there's a recognition of that issue you raised, Chair, of people try to fit in there and don't successfully, and they're just blocking the end and hanging over a little bit. So I think, again, I'll let Jean speak to the scope of the SFMTA project, but our hope is that some of those medium-term recommendations explicitly that get folded in, particularly the bulb out at the 9th and Judah corner in front of Donut World, and then in the long-term study about that full view of cross-sections on those 5 blocks of Irving Street can also get folded into that depending on the timing. But Jean, more on the NJUDA project itself.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have many details, and there are other project managers working on the NJUDA project right now, but I do want to kind of reinforce, like in the long-term recommendation from the study, we'd want to look at preventing double parking by kind of filling in that corner space over at Irving and 9th. We're also actively looking at extending buffers on the north side of Irving between 9th and 7th. We have buffers basically east of 7th, I believe, but we want to be able to demarcate where the dynamic envelope of the NJUDA is to really prevent, at least in our priority, prevent double parked cars from impeding on the operations of the NJUDA. So there are definitely longer, high-level projects that are definitely in the hopper, but for the purpose of the study, we want to make sure that it's aligned with what this TA study has also recommended. Oh, sorry. I wanted to add, the NJUDA project is doing more like a high-level outreach, doing a lot of listening tours, talking to community-based organizations and community partners, and more be available later this year.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I mean, buffers seems like a great idea, and I'd love to see further exploration of that. And then my second question is, I had the same thought that Member Ortega did, which is this sort of harkens back to the loading, commercial curb use pilot that we discussed a while back earlier this year. And I wonder, I also am a little disappointed that that is a midterm consideration. And is there an opportunity maybe to combine the pilot that had been discussed for the curb use and loading times at certain times of day? Could this be an area where we do such a study? It's just it seems like it's all day. There's like things as large as semis double parked there. It's kind of shocking. And could there be like a hub where the smaller delivery vehicles are allowed to congregate so that they're not just blocking the entire street, things like that? Is there an opportunity to do something like that sooner?
Yes, I will say. Let me catch up with those project teams and follow up with you on.
Great, thank you. And to be clear, I am supportive of all of the recommendations put forth, but I would like to see, sooner and more ambitious is my feedback. Member Ford?
Hi, I just wanted to follow up on the date on the NJUDA survey project. Like, when does that come back in front of the committee? How long is that going?
I'm not sure that's in our purview or if, it's an SFMTA study. I'm not sure that the CTA is involved in that.
This is Maria Lombardo, Chief Deputy. I don't know if Jean knows the answer, but we can certainly follow up.
Hi, sorry. Yes, the survey's still open online for the NJUDA project. If that was the question that someone had.
I was wondering, when will the study be done and have like actionable outcomes that will change this street?
Yeah, thanks for your question. Unfortunately, I don't have the details for that for your question, but I can get back to you on that.
Member Bars?
Thank you again, Chair. And I know we have a long night and this is a small item, so I'm going to move off of it in just a second, I promise. But I did want to say that, I wanted to signal to my colleagues that I am inclined to support this, even though it is not perfect, in part because this will bring real benefits to the Inner Sunset and District 7. And also, the neighbors have largely supported that, and I wanted to make that very clear. I also, though, did want to properly plus one, something that Chair Siegel just said, which is faster, more concrete recommendations, please. That would be my feedback that I'd love to send to the board and that I've already shared with my commissioner. And then I have one last question, which is, okay, long-term recommendations, follow-up study to improve parking access, follow-up study to identify opportunities for more public space on Irving Street. What would it take to make these short-term recommendations? How would we pull it in?
A couple components to that. I'll start with one of the ones we're familiar with here is identifying the funding for these. Some of them, once we start building concrete and curbs, get quite pricey. And we don't have funding identified for protected bicycle facilities that involve concrete. We do not have funding identified for moving the curb and gutter on those blocks of Irving. Even if we were to identify a revised cross-section that improves or meets. I think it's also worth pointing out the reason why the recommendation is a study is that I think as Chair has pointed out, there's a lot of different demands on those blocks, and there are trade-offs to what we do. So just as an example, if we were to consider having larger sidewalks that move the parking closer to the NJUDA trackway, for example, the cross-section that's on the Carl Street segment between the tunnel and UCSF, that segment is mostly residential. This segment is commercial. Would that mean the double parking just straight up happens on the trackway? Unclear. Also, perhaps a net negative for cyclists who now don't have on-trackway space to navigate on those few blocks. So really needing to hear from a lot of those voices as well as the different agencies would be responsible for implementing those. It's not that we don't want to move faster, it's that there are a lot of considerations that we need to make sure are incorporated there. Jean, anything to add on that as well?
No, I don't have anything else to add. Thank you for that.
Okay, so what I take away from that is there's no
clear wins. And so like every change that would be made on the street would require trade-offs, and those trade-offs need to be studied and socialized. Is that safe to say? Okay.
Yeah, I think that's correct. We did, as part of that effort between the crash in March and bringing this for consideration today, do some thinking about Irving in particular, and unfortunately weren't able to arrive at a clear set of conclusions we could recommend this thing.
Great, thank you. If there are no other questions or comments from members, is there any public comment in the room on this item? Not seeing any. Operator, is there any remote public comment on this item?
Yes, going to our first caller. Bob, go ahead.
Yes, hello. This is Bob Feinbaum. I'm president of Save Muni. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. I would like to talk about a little bit about the stop consolidation. As you all know, that has pluses and minuses. The plus, obviously, is perhaps speeding up the transit vehicles. The minus, though, is that some people have to walk further to the stop. And I was just raising this issue because seniors and disabled people have the most difficulty in walking further to bus stops. And I wonder if you've looked at the trade-off or trade-offs between moving the vehicles faster and the number of seniors and disabled who might be affected by these changes in the neighborhoods. It's a complicated analysis sometimes, but I think it's very worthwhile doing so that you don't create a problem. For example, if you're going to save 5 minutes in travel time, that's one thing. If you're going to save 20 seconds in travel time, that's another thing, and it may not justify the inconvenience and the problems that it causes for seniors and disabled. So I wanted to ask staff if they've completely investigated or will completely investigate those kinds of trade-offs that you have to make when you consolidate stops.
Thank you, caller. Going to our next commenter.
Hello, my name is Gerald Coffin. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm a retired professional engineer and the president of the Bay Area Transportation Working Group, and we pay attention when we're active to a lot of these projects. I just have one question. I came in during your presentation, and I heard some very high recommendations from the people who took your poll or whatever it was in favor of most of these changes. Could you tell us, if you didn't already do it, a little bit about who it was that was surveyed to get those figures? Because your own committee is clearly of several minds on this. So I'm wondering if you really have a strong push from the general public, or is it a more specialized group? Thank you.
Thank you, caller. There is no additional public comment.
Great.
Great. May I have a motion and a second to approve this item? Moved by Member Margarita, seconded by Member Milford Rosales. Madam Clerk, can we please get a roll call vote?
On the motion to approve item 7, Member Bars.
Bars, aye.
Bars, aye. Member Baumgarten.
Baumgarten, aye.
Baumgarten, aye. Vice Chair Daniels.
Daniels, aye.
Daniels, aye. Member Ford.
Ford, aye.
Ford, aye. Member Kim. Kim, absent. Member Laboro. Laboro, absent. Member Levine.
Levine, aye.
Levine, aye. Member Margarita.
Margarita, aye.
Margarita, aye. Member Milford Rosales.
Milford Rosales, aye.
Milford Rosales, aye. Member Ortega?
Ortega, aye.
Ortega, aye. Chair Siegel?
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, aye. There are 9 ayes. The motion is approved.
Great, thank you, and thanks again for the presentation. We'll move on to item 8, adopt a motion of support to allocate $22 million in Prop L funds and allocate $1.8 million in Prop AA funds for 10 requests. And we have Transportation Planner Rachel Seberg here to present this item. Welcome, Ms. Seberg.
Okay, hi, thank you so much. Good evening. We have 10 allocation requests today. I am going to get right into it and we'll do my best to be brief. Okay. The first 2 requests are part of a larger multi-agency Mission SOMA improvements project. This first request for Mission Street SOMA transit improvement is from SFMTA for $700,000 to install transit priority and safety improvements noted on the slide between Beale and South Van Ness. This project is intended to reduce delays on Muni routes 14 and 14R and on Golden Gate Transit and Samtrans routes that operate on Mission. Our recommendation includes a special condition to amend the Muni Reliability and Efficiency 5YPP to add this project with funds de-obligated from the project's design phase, which was completed at a lower cost than originally anticipated and funded by non-Prop L sources. Public Works will administer the construction contract for the larger Mission SOMA improvements project, which will incorporate the transit and safety improvement scope in this request. And here we have the Public Works request for $1.4 million for repaving work that will accompany the transit improvement work on the prior slide. This $1.4 million pavement renovation scope covers 17 blocks and also includes retrofit of 35 curb ramps, new sidewalk construction, and traffic control within the project's limits on Mission Street between 4th and 11th and 4th Street from Mission to Howard. Okay, and then the next request is for $3.5 million for the design phase of an upgrade to the 12 kilovolt electrical system at SFMTA's cable car barn. The cable car barn was built in 1888 and last rehabilitated in 1984. Rehabilitation and upgrades are needed to improve working conditions and cable car operations at the facility. The full rehabilitation project will replace the roof, cranes, and elevators, add accessibility improvements, and perform a seismic retrofit, among other capital improvements. The current cost estimate for the full rehabilitation is $274 million. In November 2025, the Transportation Authority Board allocated $2 million for the environmental phase of the overall project to achieve state and federal clearance for the full scope of the rehabilitation. In the meantime, while environmental work is ongoing, SFMTA is requesting this funding to complete the design of the electrical system upgrade. The electrical system upgrade is the highest priority for the rehabilitation project. Most of the electrical equipment was installed in 1984 and is now operating past the end of its useful life. Upgrading the electrical system first will safeguard the cable car barn and fleet against system failure and enable subsequent elements of the rehabilitation to move forward in the future. The upgrade will include a new main electrical room and replace existing switchgear, transformers, and associated equipment to bring the facility up to current codes and standards. The design phase will prepare an early design package to enable contracting for construction, expected to start in 2029. Our recommendation includes a waiver to Prop L strategic plan policy that makes allocation of funds for the design phase contingent on the project having completed any required environmental documents. For the reasons stated above, we support this request and waiver. Next, we have SFMTA's paratransit program. SFMTA provides paratransit services to persons with disabilities in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. We provide Prop L funds to support paratransit operations on an annual basis. Requested funds will be used for the paratransit broker contract in fiscal year 27 for services including taxi, pre-scheduled van, and inter-county trips, group group van trips to senior centers, the Shop Around and Van Go shuttle programs, the wheelchair accessible ramp taxi incentive program, and the Essential Trip Card program. These programs are critically important to persons with disabilities and the elderly who are unable to fully utilize other forms of public transportation. On May 19th, the board approved $2.8 million in state transit assistance block grant funds for the fiscal year 27 paired transit budget. When taking the recommended STA funds and Prop L funds into consideration, this results in the Transportation Authority providing 55% of the fiscal year 27 paratransit operations funding plan, which is similar to last year. Next up is a $150,000 Prop L request from SFMTA to advance two of the recommendations in the Inner Sunset Transportation Study as described under the prior agenda item. The study recommends implementation of a painted bike lane on 7th Avenue between Lincoln Way and Judah Street, with two design alternatives at the Irving and Judah intersections. This project includes outreach to understand the public's interest and circulation needs and final design of a bike facility. Prop L funds would cover design of the 7th Avenue bike lanes, and SFMTA will use Prop B general funds to construct them. This request will also fund a bicycle connection feasibility assessment with a study area bounded by 5th Avenue, Kirkham Street, 7th Avenue, and Lincoln Way. To document the feasibility of bike connections within this area, identify opportunities and trade-offs for alternatives, and a conceptual plan for the preferred option, along with including recommendations for implementation next steps. We recommend a multi-phase allocation given the different timeframes for the two scope elements, the feasibility assessment, which is planning work for long-term improvements, and the design phase for near-term improvements for the 7th Avenue bicycle lanes. The next request is from SFMTA for $243,000 to provide the local match to federal One Bay Area Grant or OBAG funds for the Safe Routes to School Non-Infrastructure program. SFMTA staff presented on this program in March of 2026. The program delivers educational encouragement and experiential activities aimed at decreasing commuting in single-family vehicles to San Francisco schools, improving safety of walking and bicycling, and reducing city congestion and air pollution. Specific tasks to be accomplished through this grant include in-school education related to transportation safety and choices, neighborhood skill building and outreach, including weekend bike classes, walking school buses and bike trains, and annual walk and roll to school events, providing technical assistance and education on personal safety in school communities where environmental hazards are barriers to families walking, biking, or taking transit to school, coordinating between SFUSD and SFMTA to streamline responses to traffic and safety needs on and around school sites, and evaluation of program impacts on safety and mode shift of children traveling to and from school. Next, we have a $449,000 request from SFMTA for District 1 Neighborhood Program funds for the Fulton Street Safety Improvements NTIP project. In November 2024, the Transportation Authority Board adopted the District 1 Multimodal Transportation Study. This request would fund the planning, design, and construction of pedestrian safety improvements at 3 intersections along Fulton Street to start implementing some of the study's recommendations based on currently available funding. Improvements are anticipated to include side islands, which are a quick-build form of pedestrian bulb-outs that prevents parking in a daylit area of the curb, crosswalk upgrades, flashing beacons, and other elements to improve pedestrian visibility. This request will provide funding for planning, including site evaluations and public outreach to confirm the feasibility of implementing the proposed scope on Fulton at 40th Avenue and 20th Avenue and 12th Avenue in Funston, followed by design and construction of the final recommended measures. On this next slide here, and also in the allocation request form in the agenda enclosure, we have a map of the project area with specific improvements by location. Okay, we only have 3 more to go. This next project will support planning for startup and evaluation of a new on-demand shuttle as recommended in the Transportation Authority's Treasure Island Supplemental Transportation Study. The shuttle will serve trips on Treasure Island and Yerba Buena Island, including service to areas not covered by existing Muni service and providing first and last mile connections to the ferry terminal and Muni bus stops. Phase 1 is expected to be done by March 2027, and tasks include service design, outreach, and an evaluation plan, along with a draft request for proposals to release to potential shuttle operators. Phase 2 includes procurement of an operator and launch of the service and will be funded separately. Service is anticipated to begin in mid-2027, and developer funds will cover initial operating expenses with long-term operations to be funded by TIMA's congestion pricing program. The recommended allocation is conditioned upon amendment of the Transportation Demand Program, or TDM 5YPP, to add the subject project with funds from the TDM Strategic Plan Implementation Placeholder. The placeholder was created to fund projects that are consistent with the recommended actions to be identified through the TDM Strategic Plan Update. The TDM Strategic Plan Update was anticipated to be completed by June 2025, but has been delayed. And in the absence of the TDM strategic plan recommendations, the 5YPP allows these placeholder funds to be allocated to projects that score well against the 5YPP prioritization criteria for the Prop L TDM program, such as project readiness, supporting mode shift and/or time shift, and demonstrated cost effectiveness. Okay, so for the final two requests, these are both public works paving projects. This request is for $1.8 million in Prop L funds to support the paving scope of the Geary Boulevard Improvements Phase 2 project. The project area is Geary Boulevard from Stanton to 32nd Avenue in Districts 1 and 2. This project is being coordinated with an SFPUC project to replace aging sewer and water infrastructure, and with SFMTA's transit reliability and traffic safety improvements, such as bulb outs and signals, which will be implemented through the same construction contract as the paving scope. And finally, we have our last request from Public Works, which is for $1.8 million for in-prop AA vehicle registration fees. The requested funds will be used for the construction phase of the Front Street and Sansom Street pavement renovation, which includes demolition and pavement renovation of 21 blocks, construction and retrofit of 34 curb ramps, and other sidewalk and traffic control work that goes along with it. The various locations proposed throughout District 3 average in the mid-50s of the pavement condition index, and there is a map in the meeting materials showing the project limits. And with that, I can take any questions. We have project managers available in person and remotely. And I do ask that if project managers are responding to questions, do please turn on your camera. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Member Ford.
Thank you. In part, maybe because Member Kim's not here, I wanted to talk about the Geary Boulevard 2-year delivery timeline. This month we did the 19th Ave shutdown that allowed us to repave 19th Ave in basically 3 weekends. And I'm wondering how PUC and the paving and the contractors and the funding could do a certain similar level of coordination to minimize overall construction days along that corridor.
We have a couple public works staff who might be more equipped to answer this question.
Hello, this is Paul Baradas from Public Works. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, great. Yeah, sorry, I'm on my phone. I'm not too sure about the 19th project, but I believe that is a straightforward paving only project. Sewer work on projects does take a lot longer. They're only able to do, hundreds of feet of sewer pipe laying down, per day or week. The paving on the project will actually happen very quickly. We can pave about a block a day. So the paving usually happens at the very end of the project. And so I'm not sure if that's helpful.
Okay, then I'll rephrase. The sewer portion of the Van Ness bus lane was a big portion of why that was a 20-year, multi-billion-dollar project. So I'm wondering what lessons we've learned from the Van Ness project that make project delivery on this more likely to be successful.
May I jump in, Liz Bryson from SFMTA? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Hi. Liz Bryson. I'm part of SFMTA's Geary Boulevard Improvement Project team. It is a great question, and we have what I think is a pretty good answer as well. So the project that the paving allocation is connected to is the second half of Geary Transit and Safety Improvements. It's focused on Stanyon to 34th Avenue. We recently completed in 2021 a very similar scope of work from Stanyon East to Market Street, and that work was also coordinated with underground work that the SFPUC did first. So just to give you, I know we're short on time, so I'm not going to give you everything because there's a lot, but one example of what we did in the first phase of Geary that was different than Van Ness and is carried forward into the second phase of Geary is Van Ness had one contract for all the different infrastructure work. And in the case of these projects, there's two different contracts. SFPUC already has their own contract for utility work. And, you know, the good news is most of the disruptive utility work is already complete. And the work that remains beyond the repaving work that your request is for is primarily transit and safety upgrades that are at spot locations. So things like upgrading traffic signals, building bus bulbs and pedestrian bulbs. So as compared to what people probably remember on Van Ness Avenue, where you know the entire stretch had to be dug up and rebuilt, the work that remains is really just at spot locations like intersections. So hopefully that helps.
Member Bars?
Thank you. So I have a question, and then I'd like to make a motion. And my question is, oh no, I just lost my tab. So many tabs. Oh, it's actually about Prop L. Maybe this is for you, Director Lombardo. I had been under the impression that Prop L was largely for capital expenses, and yet the paratransit item is for SFMTA operations. So why is it that? Why is that?
Important. It is, paratransit is the only significant dedicated portion of the sales tax for operations, and that has been the case since the original sales tax approved in 1989.
Oh, really? So since 1989, since we started essentially self-funding capital, we've had a carve-out for paratransit operations. And has the funding level remained the same?
It has increased over time, probably not as much as some people would like, but in this latest iteration, that the numbers aren't precise, but roughly probably went from like 11% to maybe 12 or 13%, which doesn't sound a lot, but it's of 110, 150 million a year.
Super helpful. Thank you. I really didn't understand the answer to that, so that puts everything in context. Okay, so my motion, I'm going to attempt to move this, but I might mess it up. I would like to sever the Inner Sunset bike connection item from the rest of them. And I'd like to understand better why the design for the painted bike lane on 7th Avenue between Lincoln and Judah is combined with finding the best long-term options for a low-stress bicycle route between 7th Avenue and Lawton. Wait, sorry, there was a surprise question in there. I do have a motion. I'm not sure what to do with my motion. I do make that motion. So, Chair, I don't know what you want to do. But then I also have a question for staff.
Can we hold your motion till after the questions, or
yeah. Sure. So we could reverse the order. So then I'll ask, why are those two things combined? They seem like different things. Could I get the answer to that? I can posit a guess while you went off. I think it was important to Chair Melgar to advance both of them, and just having them combined in one request. They are separate scopes of work, but there's like one grant, it's being approved, and they both can start now.
And we're gathering Andy Heidel, the internal project manager. The only thing I'll add is that there was also going to be economies of scale with the outreach that was going to be done for the long-term potential solutions, as well as the near-term potential solution for the nearer-term work.
I apologize. Could you restate the question?
Yeah, I wanted to know why the two things went together. I wanted to know why we're designing the painted bike lanes on 7th Avenue at the same time as doing the low-stress bicycle route between 7th Ave and Lawton and Golden Gate Park.
Sure. So as the report mentioned, both the economies of scale and convenience for community members of having the outreach about both of those conversations at the same time. The other is that it's what it is a yes and approach. So the thing that we can get on the ground and implemented quickly, more quickly I should say, is the painted bicycle lane. The examination of lower stress, higher protection improvements on potentially 5th and 6th Avenues, Hugo, Judah, et cetera, is something that is not fully good. So I think there's an opportunity to identify some quick build improvements there that may be able to sneak in. But there might be some larger improvements. You raised earlier, the treatment for bicycles at Lincoln in particular. So just as an example, study hasn't started yet, so I don't want to presuppose anything. But they're tied together both so we can talk to community members about them together, and also emphasize that recognizing that a Class 2 bike lane, as you raised in the earlier item, is not the ideal solution. But being able to communicate, here's what we can do quickly, and then let's also talk about what we can do that might be better.
I appreciate that, and I am going to share my thinking on this, but I don't like the look of voting against a bike project, for the record. But I mean, I just heard you say that there could be a different option to get from the park and Lawton and 7th Avenue that we don't have, that's not fully funded, right? Which is, I believe, in certain circles has been called the West Side Wiggle, and which I think is an adorable name, which wouldn't take away space for cars and which would direct people biking off of 7th Avenue, which is a high auto vehicle route, and also right where there was that collision at Irving. And so I'm struck. They feels like the outreach bit goes together, but that the solutions don't. Like, I don't like, if we have a funding shortfall for a different option, why not just use the money that would go towards painting the bike lane towards the different option? It is a question. Is there a reason not to?
Yeah, so when we were scoping this work out with projects, it posed that advancing the 7th Avenue bike lane does not include the implementation of anything else. So it's not a sort of one-to-one trade-off that we have on the table here, partially because there is that additional study and engagement required for the alternate route. I think, as we were talking about at the Inner Sunset item on Irving Street, there are also trade-offs to the West Side Wiggle. It is a hillier route. There are more turns, which also introduce potential danger. There is the diverter for cars at 7th Avenue right now. The 2 blocks of 7th Avenue are in SFMTA's biking and rolling plan as the North Star network. So developing an alternate route is making a change to that recommendation. And so that requires that planning and understanding both of trade-offs and whether that's something that folks are interested in pursuing.
Okay, I think my last bit here, and look, this is a small item. This is $150,000. We have the paratransit one is a $14 million one, and I realize I'm sweating it, but I I don't know. I stood out there with a radar gun about a month ago during the peak hour, and I clocked a lot of cars driving well over 25 miles per hour. And I think that NACTO, we have NACTO, right? The city basically has said we're going to follow NACTO, the NACTO street design guidelines. And NACTO specifically says if you have thousands of cars on an arterial a day going like north of 25 miles per hour, you can't put a painted bike lane there, or you shouldn't really. But I just I don't get it. Like, why it feels like it's easy. It doesn't feel like it's helpful. So, I mean, what's the counter argument to that? Like, why not just use the money towards something that gets people off of that street?
I would say our findings from the Inner Sunset study, and perhaps if SFMTA staff wants to speak to this one as well, were that there are cyclists that use both routes today. There is existing bicycle facilities on Judah, on 5th and on 6th, and share rows on Hugo, as well as the access point on 5th. A higher volume of cyclists, we didn't do counts, but we did field observations, so I don't want to be too specific about this, use 7th Avenue. It is the direct connection to Laguna Honda and through to Golden Gate Park, particularly if you're going to the park. Folks that are going east and downtown might make better use of the 5th Avenue connection or even continue behind the police station and to the Slow Street on Page, for example. So people do make good use of both routes, and I presume that if you were out there clocking cars, you also saw a good number of cyclists actually using the street. I'm sorry. Get real close to it. Okay. Sarah, were you able to hear me? Okay.
Yes, I was.
I won't fully repeat myself then. For the benefit of folks on the phone, I think I was pointing out that there are cyclists today that use both routes, and a slightly higher number of cyclists use 7th Avenue, even with the drawbacks, member bars, that you identified to using that route. So again, I will recognize and agree with you that it is not the perfect or ideal solution. I do believe in the finding and the recommendation of the study is that it is an improvement over the existing condition to help define space, and particularly for cyclists headed south or uphill that may not be able to as easily keep up with the speed of traffic, make it more easy for those vehicles to coexist while we think about what this ultimate solution might be.
Andy, sorry, you may not have seen us. Matt Lasky of SFMTA can speak to us. He's on the phone.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Commissioner Bars, those are great questions, and thank you for them. I mean, I was going to say most of what Andy said already was that it does offer the most, direct route from the existing bikeway to the park, and and bicyclists do use it. However, it doesn't preclude any improvements or changes to the west side wiggle option, which could potentially be a more comfortable route. I'd say also that in terms of outreach, I think working to those kind of together makes a lot of sense in talking to the community, and that 7th Avenue would be like an easier sell, I'd say, to the community, where I think there would be a lot of back and forth and negotiations with the West Side Wiggle options. And so those neighborhood connectors aren't going anywhere. And ideally we can make, improvements to flow vehicles and reduce traffic volumes on those streets. But as a predecessor, we could do the 7th Avenue bike lanes. So, thank you.
And Member Bars, I noted your request to make a motion. I think let's return to that after all the questions and comments and public comment. Let me see. Member Milford Rosales.
So as someone who frequently rides the 14 back up into Soma from the Mission late at night, I am so excited for this repaving project. Earbuds don't work, noise canceling doesn't work, like thinking doesn't work. It's just when there are enough people on the bus, it feels like like we're all in it together. But when it's just like you and three other people and you're getting shaken around, it sucks. So I'm so excited for the repaving work there and on 4th Street. Thank you all very much. Just wanted to share that.
Member Ortega, your card up there.
Hello. I'm surprised Member 4 did not ask about Treasure Island, so I suppose I shall. It is only $86,000, so if you were making a hash of 150, here I am about 86. There's actually a couple of things about it that I think are going to be very simple answers that that piqued my ears a little bit. I too was like $86,000. I guess that's fine. And then three things happened. First is you said that this is a recommendation allocation conditional upon the amendment of the Transportation Demand Program 5YPP, and how then, and this is where I got really confused. So I think my first question is, this seems to be something that we're doing because something isn't approved for Treasure Island and we need to make progress. That is how it sounded, and I know that makes very little sense, but that's why I'm asking. So why is this conditional upon a TDM 5YPP if it's supposed to be coming out of the Treasure Island plan? Can I get a little bit more?
It gets fast, and if I mess up, Anna will correct it. So this is just, we often do an amendment to the 5-year prioritization program, or for Claire's benefit, 5YPP. That's the 5-year project list we approved. So the idea was for the Transportation Demand Management, or TDM, program in Prop L, we are working on a strategic plan with MTA and other departments to prioritize the type of projects that we want to fund and bring that back to the CAC with criteria and all. We aren't done with that. It's a little bit slower than it's taken us, but we allowed a provision to make amendments to that placeholder to fund other projects if they come forward and they score decently. This is one of those projects. It is a TDM project. It scores well, so we're recommending using a part of that placeholder to fund the shuttle service.
This brings me to my second question, though, which is, it sounds like there's been a study that we need a shuttle so that we can get people around as that last mile on Treasure Island. So now we need another study before we can have this shuttle service. Is that correct?
Hi, I'm Alex Pan. I'm a transportation planner. So it's a little more complicated than that because Treasure Island has this TDM plan, and it includes an on-island shuttle. So the shuttle is part of the long-term transportation plan for Treasure Island. This study is to take a closer look at what that shuttle service would look like, and look at some of the vendor options out there for operating the shuttle.
Alex, is it basically we're doing the work to be able to issue an RFP for a shuttle provider?
Okay, that makes more sense, because there was just a lot about this where it was like, yeah, it isn't actually that much money, but it sounded like we were doing double work on something that hadn't been approved yet. So just kind of a recommendation about how you guys presented that, because it just seems really strange. Thank you.
Member Baumgarten.
Thank you for walking through all of that. I think also as it is my first meeting, I think there's things I'm realizing now. I'm like, oh, I probably could maybe Google some of these questions, but if I had more time, so apologies if these are questions like that. But regarding the paratransit item, and this is one of those ones I think I could probably answer for myself if I look more in advance, but I'm curious how the programs within the paratransit omnibus bill are kind of audited for utilization and ensure that we're allocating money to the most needed programs.
And maybe while the project manager, Jonathan Chang, is getting online, he's coming online, there are some statistics in your packet on usage in order to get a per passenger cost to give you some framework on the annual usage. And then also I'll defer to Gary also as well, and he can talk about the suite of the services that SFMTA has elected to include in the paratransit program.
Hi, Jonathan Chang. I'm the paratransit manager at SFMTA. So the money, the $14 million will help fund the entirety of the paratransit program. So that includes not only the service, which is provided through both a van and taxi program, but also the administration of the paratransit program. So that includes registering people for the program, as well as some non-ADA services that we provide. So that includes the Essential Trip Card program, which is a subsidized taxi program that is available to all individuals over 65, as well as people with disabilities. A shop around program, which provides a grocery shopping shuttle to, again, people who are 65 or older, as well as a Van Go service, which is a shuttle service for groups of individuals who want to attend cultural or recreational events throughout the city. In terms of, I think, breakdown, I believe taxis provide about 50% of our service. Another 30 to 35% is done through our SF Access service. And then another 15% is done through our group van service, which is primarily group transportation to adult day health centers.
Awesome. Thank you. Great. Okay, yeah, I think that's all for me. Thank you.
Member Margarita?
Thank you for your presentation. I really appreciate it. I'm particularly excited about the education piece of it continuing, but I did have a question with regards to the paratransit that you just reported on. For some of the folks that have unfortunately gotten some of those vouchers cut off within recent years, does this mean that now if this is approved that some of those vouchers for folks in the community in San Francisco might get those back, or it's irrelevant and it really depends on the community-based organization that they're connected with, for example, Unlock, et cetera? Just because, yeah, does that make sense? Thank you.
So again, I'm not sure about those vouchers that you're referring to. They may be connected to, or like Unlock may give vouchers that they fund themselves to clients who attend their services. Those vouchers are not administered through the SF Paratransit program. However, there are, I believe, maybe similar programs that they can partake in, such as the Essential Trip Card program, which is a subsidized taxi program that, again, anyone over 65 or has a disability can participate in. For that program, individuals are able to purchase at a subsidized rate, $60 worth of taxi voucher service to use for any trips each month. To use for any taxi trips that they want to take throughout the city. So that program is, I guess, independent of the other voucher programs that may be administered by other organizations such as Unlock.
Got it. Thank you for your answer. So with this budget, does that mean that it's just going to continue as it's been provided with that taxi program for community members over 65, or is it going to be augmented, or is it status quo?
So yeah, we will be able to continue to provide the service, the Essential Trip Card program as it is. We will continue to do outreach to the community, as well as enroll individuals into this program, as well as allow, as well as educate them about other transportation options they have in the city.
And the last question, I promise, is that, so this has to be approved every year. So this is just for this year, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Is there any public comment in the room on this item?
Thank you, Edward Mason. Item number 5, safe routes to schools. I would hope that in the future, that past performance of that program would be indicated, such as either the percentage or the number of auto trips that had decreased as a result of that program. Right now, I don't know. You know, they say we decreased the auto trips, but how many out of the funding for it? I have a neighbor that's a school teacher, taught at Lowell for years, and he taught an early class. Students would be late. The reason they were late was because of transportation, getting there by Muni. And so there was an upturn in attendance when parents drove the students there. Got another neighbor, and having safe routes to schools, I don't think it's really practical because child goes to McKinley grade school, and that's about 2 hills over Castro Street to get from home to there. So, and the child's under 10 years old, and I don't think that child is going to be bicycling over 2 major hills to get there. Drives the child to school. So I think we have to between what our desires are and reality, I think we have to balance that. Thank you.
Thank you. Operator, is there any remote public comment on this item?
There is no remote public comment.
Great, thank you. Member Bars, did you still want to make a motion?
Yes, I do. I'd like to sever the inner Sunset Bike connection item from the rest of them.
I get a second or no second needed. Okay.
Oh, that doesn't require a motion.
Great. Can we sever it then? Great. Okay. Okay, can I get a motion and a second on everything besides the 7th Avenue bike lane, moved by Member Milford Rosales and seconded by Member Margarita? Madam Clerk, can we please get a roll call vote?
On the motion of support to allocate Prop L funds and allocate, Prop AA funds for everything except the Inner Sunset Bike Connection Project. Member Bars?
Bars, aye.
Oh, did we do the motion and second for this?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, apologies. Okay, Member Bars?
Bars, aye.
Bars, aye. Member Baumgarten?
Baumgarten, aye.
Baumgarten, aye. Vice Chair Daniels?
Daniels, aye.
Daniels, aye. Member Ford?
Ford, nay.
Ford, nay. Member Kim? Kim, absent. Member Laboro? Laboro, absent. Member Levine?
Levine, aye.
Levine, aye. Member Margarita?
Margarita, aye.
Margarita, aye. Member Milford Rosales?
Milford Rosales, aye.
Milford Rosales, aye. Member Ortega?
Ortega, aye.
Ortega, aye. Chair Siegel?
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, aye. There are 8 ayes. That motion is approved.
Great. Can I get a motion and a second on the 7th Avenue bike lane item?
Can you clarify what you mean by that?
Oh, we severed the 7th Avenue bike lane from the rest of the request so that we could vote on it separately, and now I'm soliciting a motion to vote on that item.
The motion would be to support the allocating Prop L funds for the Inner Sunset Bike Connection project.
It's both the 7th Avenue project to actually implement it and the longer range study that was being talked about to improve the bike connections.
Yes. I'm the one who made the motion. Maybe I made the unnecessary motion. I'm sorry. I'm not an expert in this. I'd like to very quickly, and I do mean quickly, just explain. I am not against spending $150,000 to figure out a bike connection in this part of the Inner Sunset. We desperately need that. I am against spending it on a painted bike lane. It seemed to me like the only way to make that point, and I have shared that with Chair Melgar and the Commissioner and Melgar staff, and I feel very confident that that's the right decision based off of my experience in the neighborhood, as well as just feedback I've heard from people. And I don't agree with the staff recommendation, and I don't think it's a good use of $150,000 spent. That said, I don't know how to send that message. So, I mean, I would be inclined to vote for it if we could send a message to the board that said, like, maybe this money should just go for the study, not the painted bike lane. But I'm not sure how to send that message. So, Chair, I don't know if that's a question for you exactly, but that's my intent.
I think I'll defer to Director Lombardo. Maybe could.
Thank you for explaining, Member Bars. I get it now, a little slow. I think the first severing it to vote separately was the right move. But now I think where we are, what I'm hearing you say is perhaps you would like to make a motion to amend the staff recommendation to only fund the part you want to fund. And then if there's a second to that, then the body can vote on that.
Yeah, actually, that sounds great. So I would like to make a motion to amend the item to use the $150,000 towards the bike connections study. I'm not sure how to frame it. The Inner Sunset Bike Connection outreach and study work. Yeah, that would be good.
Is there a second for this motion? Moved by Member Milford Rosales. All right, Madam Clerk, can we please get a roll call vote on that item?
On the motion of support for the motion that's stated by Chair. On the motion to amend.
Could I quickly ask a?
Oh, yes, sorry.
Just what does, in this scenario, what would an aye mean and what would a nay mean?
On this, the aye would be to amend it, and then we would take another vote on the amended item.
Sorry, no, it's okay. This is fair. We went over this in her late night orientation last night, so this is pop quiz. So the first, because we are amending the staff recommendation, the first vote is to see if the body wants to amend the staff recommendation. So if that vote is approved, then the CAC would get to vote whether to approve support the allocation or not.
On the motion to amend the Inner Sunset Bike Connection project, Member Bars.
Bars, aye.
Bars, aye. Member Baumgarten?
Baumgarten, nay.
Baumgarten, nay. Vice Chair Daniels?
Daniels, aye.
Daniels, aye. Member Ford?
Ford, nay.
Ford, nay. Member Kim? Kim, absent. Member Laboro? Laboro, absent. Member Levine?
Levine, aye.
Levine, aye. Member Margarita?
Margarita, aye.
Margarita, aye. Member Milford Rosales?
Milford Rosales, aye.
Milford Rosales, aye. Member Ortega?
Ortega, aye.
Ortega, aye. Chair Siegel?
Siegel abstain.
Siegel abstain. There are 6 ayes. The motion to amend has been approved.
So now can I get a motion and a second to approve the item as amended, which is to fund the alternate connections study only? Yes. Moved by Member Bars, seconded by Member Margarita. Madam Clerk, could we please get a roll call vote?
On the motion to approve the amended item, specific amended item, Member Bars?
Bars, aye.
Bars, aye. Member Baumgarten?
Baumgarten, aye.
Baumgarten, aye. Vice Chair Daniels?
Daniels, aye.
Daniels, aye. Member Ford?
Ford, aye.
Ford, aye. Member Kim? Kim, absent. Member Laboro? Laboro, absent. Member Levine?
Levine, aye.
Levine, aye. Member Margarita?
Margarita, aye.
Margarita, aye. Member Milford Rosales?
Milford Rosales, aye.
Milford Rosales, aye. Member Ortega?
Ortega, aye.
Ortega, aye. Chair Siegel?
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, aye. There are 9 ayes. The amended motion passes.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much for the presentation. And we'll move on to item. I do want to note that we do have 3 items remaining that are fairly meaty, so members just be cognizant of that. All right, we're moving to item 9, adopt a motion of support to amend the Prop K standard grant agreement for the District 2 safety study and implementation, and release $430,000 on reserve to implement the near-term recommendations. And Transportation Planner Rachel Seberg is here again to present this item.
Yeah, hi again. All right, I'm going to get right into it. So just to provide a little bit of background, in 2023, the Transportation Authority Board allocated $270,000 in neighborhood program funds for SFMTA and Transportation Authority staff to conduct the District 2 safety study, which the board approved in March 2026. The same action also placed $430,000 on reserve for SFMTA to implement recommendations from the study. Now that the study has been adopted, SFMTA has requested release of the implementation funds and amendment of the Prop K grant agreement to reflect the scope, schedule, cost, and budget for the study recommendations to be constructed. This study was requested by former Commissioner Stefani, and we conducted the study in partnership with SFMTA to improve safety and access to places in District 2 that attract vulnerable road users, such as parks, schools, and healthcare facilities. We focused our work in 5 locations across the district that have a high concentration of these types of places. The study recommended both near-term quick build and long-term improvements that are specific to each of the study areas. The focus on today's action is funding design and implementation of the recommended quick build improvements, which are summarized on this next slide. So this is just a summary showing the location of the final recommendations. The requested funds are to design and construct improvements at 10 locations in the study areas throughout the district. Recommended improvements are intended to address safety and access challenges using quick build treatments to improve pedestrian and bicyclist safety, visibility, and comfort, and to reduce vehicular speeds. The scope includes painted safety zones, traffic signal upgrades and modifications, new traffic signs and bicycle wayfinding, traffic island and median reconfigurations, and vertical deflection traffic calming devices, which includes speed humps, cushions, and tables. SFMTA anticipates the project will be open for use by June of 2028. And here is a map of the locations with final recommended improvements. You also have a list of locations with a description of the recommendations at each location in your packet materials. So just to recap, the item before you is to amend the Prop K standard grant grant agreement for the District 2 safety study and implementation, NTIP planning and capital to update the scope, schedule, cost, and funding plan. And it's also to release $430,000 on reserve to implement the District 2 safety study near-term recommendations. With that, I can take any questions. We also have the PM available. Thanks.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Do any CAC members have any questions or comments on this item? Not seeing any. Is there any public? Member Ford.
Hi, I'm just a little confused because this is the first time I've seen this study. It looks like the project areas are like kind of scattered about the district, and then the lines in the recommended locations. I guess, how are those project areas chosen, and why aren't they like more connected for like movement from A to B? Why do they seem like just sort of pinpoints?
Yeah, that's a good question. The goal of the study was to really focus on the needs of vulnerable road users, and so we focused on types of places that we would expect a lot of those types of people to be gathering. So that's like Rachel mentioned, parks, schools, healthcare facilities. Another goal of the project was to kind of distribute funding evenly throughout the district, and that's why we wanted to choose study areas with both a high concentration of these types of places and also that covered basically the full breadth of District 2.
Member Baumgarten.
Yep, thanks for the presentation. I'm really excited to see these improvements. I just wanted to ask for clarification, which entities are doing the actual construction? Is this an SFPW project or contractors?
I believe it would be SFMTA, and if there's SFMTA project managers on the line, maybe they can fill in more.
Good evening. This is Damon Curtis. Can you hear me and see me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yep.
All right, great. Damon Curtis, Traffic Calming Program Manager at SFMTA. And the bulk of these improvements will be done by MTA and Public Works crews. There may be an opportunity to contract out some of the traffic calming work depending on how it all comes together as we get through design. But my expectation is that these will all be delivered by city staff.
Awesome. Thanks for the clarification. The question behind that question was, I was just curious, like, considering some of the other projects and the price tags on them, I was pleased that this one seemed really reasonable considering the amount of places that are being worked on. So it was just, yeah, okay, cool. Thank you for the clarification.
Is there any public comment in the room on this item? Not seeing any. Operators or any remote public comment on this item?
There is no remote public comment.
Great. Can I get a motion and a second to approve this item? Moved by Member Margarita, seconded by Member Ford. Madam Clerk, could we please get a roll call vote?
On the motion to approve item 9, Member Bars?
Bars, aye.
Bars, aye. Member Baumgarten?
Baumgarten, aye.
Baumgarten, aye. Vice Chair Daniels? Daniels, absent. Member Ford?
Ford, aye.
Ford, aye. Member Kim? Kim, absent. Member Laboro? Laboro, absent. Member Levine?
Levine, aye.
Levine, aye. Member Margarita?
Margarita, aye.
Margarita, aye. Member Milford Rosales?
Milford Rosales, aye.
Milford Rosales, aye. Member Ortega?
Ortega, aye.
Ortega, aye. Chair Siegel?
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, aye. There are 8 ayes. The motion is approved.
Great, thank you, and thanks again for the presentation. Move on to item 11, adopt a motion of support to allocate $180,000 in Prop L funds to the SFMTA and appropriate $49,000 in Prop L funds for the Central Subway North Beach Extension Study. This item received public comment, which has been posted to the website, and I'd like to welcome Principal Transportation Planner Andrew Heidel back to present this item.
All right. Thank you, Chair. Andrew Heidel, Principal Transportation Planner at the Transportation Authority, to present this. All right, to start with a bit of background on this request, in December 2016, the Transportation Authority allocated funds towards the T3rd Phase 3 feasibility study the feasibility of an extension of light rail transit service from Chinatown to North Beach and beyond to the Fisherman's Wharf area in San Francisco. Starting work on the larger extension study, the project team determined that the public would be better served by a more focused study on a North Beach extension, as the Central Subway tunnels actually continue past the existing terminus at Chinatown Rose Pack Station into North Beach, and that a potential shorter extension might be more cost-effective, along with the need to better understand the benefits and trade-offs of building a station in North Beach near the end of the current tunnel alignment. Central Subway North Beach Extension Study, subject to this request, has two main components. SFMTA's scope is to study the benefits, trade-offs, and considerations of pursuing a North Beach-only extension versus a longer extension for the Central Subway. The scope includes conceptual engineering, design, and cost estimates for a North Beach-only extension phase, along with a comparative analysis of a North Beach-only extension versus a longer extension. Transportation Authority scope is to support SFMTA within the study by preparing preliminary ridership forecasts to aid the evaluation of the options, and to prepare for subsequent long-range planning efforts, including the next major update to SFTP, and also to provide input to the study's tasks related to forecasting, planning, and evaluation. Context: here's a map of the study area, including the unfurnished tunnel. For those not familiar, these tunnels were constructed to reach a place to remove the tunnel boring machines that were used to construct the existing Central Subway. They're labeled here as unfurnished, since these are just the tunnels. To be clear, there's no tracks, signaling, power, infrastructure beyond the Chinatown station at this time. On the revised scope of work, SFMTA has requested an amendment to the existing December 2016 Prop K grant, use about $370,000 in remaining funds for the North Beach Extension Study, and a concurrent allocation of $180,800 in Prop L funds to fully fund the study. We're also requesting an appropriation of $49,900 in Prop L funds to fund the Transportation Authority support for ridership, forecasting, planning, and oversight. SFMTA is anticipated to complete this work with a final report in May 2028, and will subsequently present that back to the CAC and the Transportation Authority Board as an informational item. That concludes my presentation. Happy to answer questions, and additionally, project sponsors from SFMTA are on the line as well.
Thank you for the presentation. I didn't see whose card went up first. Can someone help me out? Member Ortega? Or... Okay, great. Member Ortega?
Hello. My card just fell. Thank you so much for the presentation. I have a few comments that I'd like to add first, and then I'd also like to draw all of the members to read the public comments online that were emailed in. There's two very interesting ones. The first is calling for an audit of the Central Subway because they were concerned about how much was spent, and they said that before any funding should come forward, that should be required. The second probably much more aligns with my thinking, which is this isn't far enough. And I understand that this is going to be an analysis of what it is to do the North Beach versus continue on, but I really hope that this study actually considers like multiple paths of expansion. I want it to not just go to North Beach. I don't want it to just go to Fisherman's Wharf. I want to understand subways in the north side of the city. And I also want the subway study to focus on what it needs to do to have actual transfer times, because that is something that is severely lacking right now in all of Muni's service And I feel like this is a good opportunity to have an understand of impact of transfer times, especially for above and below ground service, in like what we're talking about. Like we're talking about ridership, and I feel like I know I would ride Muni a lot more if I actually believed that I would have a reliable transfer and not get stranded for 30 minutes because I missed the bus. So I have no issue with the study being done. I am sad that it is going to be 2028 before I can even find out what it will cost us to build track for tunnel that already exists. I also would be interested in understanding why the tunnel was extended to some amount but not the rest of it. I think that we did cover that at one point and I can't recall. And what the borrowing cost would be to continue further north. I understand that there are a lot of concerns for that, but when I think about other major cities in the world, including Tokyo, which has as much seismic risk as San Francisco and has probably, you know, a lot more underground subway, I just find it very hard to understand why we can't have this and why the timeline is so long. And so that's very long-winded. Thank you, members, for your patience. So I think my first question is, I guess my only question really is, so we're reallocating funds of an existing thing, and then we're also allocating more funds, is that correct? Kind of? Okay.
Correct, yeah.
Great. Awesome. I would like to ask that some of the things that I have mentioned be included in this study when it is finally done. That is, I think, my only question. I want to see more details. I feel like a lot of the times the studies that come here, it is sort of a, this was done, this is the analysis. I really want this to be like a meaty thing. And then I also think it is fair to talk about why did the cost of the central subway balloon and include those findings in the study and talk about how we're not going to have that happen again if we do end up going forward with any type of expansion for this line, which is needed. We need the subway to go to Fisherman's Wharf. The lack of transit in that area sometimes is really frustrating. Thank you.
Member Baumgarten.
Again, thank you for that presentation. This is an item that is obviously very near and dear to my heart as a District 3 resident and someone who commutes to work there every day. I probably would echo a lot of what Member Ortega mentioned, so I won't reinvent the wheel here. But in terms of public comment, I just wanted to reiterate how important and critical this kind of infrastructure is for our city. And I think there are lots of international studies done in international places. I was thinking about this as well with places that also have seismic activity and similar landscapes. I'm curious if we have done any brother-sister city stuff to collaborate and borrow findings from studies already done that cover maybe similar topics, if not obviously San Francisco specific. But that all kind of leading to one of my key questions, which is what would it take to expedite this study so we don't have to wait until after 2028 to see action taken?
I'll ask Liz Bryson, SFMTA project manager, to reply to questions about schedule.
Hey everyone. So I hear the question is, can we do it faster? And the reason we proposed the 2-year schedule in the allocation request is there's some amount of uncertainty around some of the steps that are needed to get through the study. As one example, this work is envisioned to include both our in-house staff doing some of the work and also rely on hiring a consultant team with some of the specialized geotechnical engineering expertise that we don't have in-house to do some of the work. Often the time it takes, we're going to be using one of our as-needed consultant benches, but sometimes it can take a little longer than one would expect or hope to get through that process. So we did a conservative schedule that we're confident we can get everything done in, but we do strive to get it done quicker than 2 years.
Okay, thank you for that. With those other parties who are coming in and contributing with some of that more geotechnical work, I'm just curious if, like, part of are RFPs submitted for that kind of stuff to those entities? Or
Yes.
do
So
we submit RFPs to them, and they're competing for these contracts?
yeah, so one thing that we do to try to decrease the time it takes to bring on board a consultant is sometimes we do what is called an as-needed contract, which outlines the type of services that we regularly need for our projects, and consultants compete to win one of those contracts, and then when work is scoped and ready to go, you can initiate a task order with those contractors, and that's less time than doing a full procurement, but still does take some time. And depending on the value of the task order, we often let the multiple firms that hold one of the as-needed contracts each have the opportunity to submit a proposal for that task order.
Okay, appreciate the clarification. Yeah, I think the Central Subway is obviously kind of a flashy issue that gets a lot of attention. I know this is just for the study, but I think it gets a lot of attention for a good reason, and that we, as citizens of the city, deserve to have that kind of access. So I know you guys are working hard on it, but appreciate continued pressure on timelines to see things come to fruition as soon as they could. So, thank you.
Member Margarita.
Thank you so much for the presentation and the information, and also thank you to the other members who made comments. I appreciate those comments, and also appreciate the public comments. And so my question is, well, I have two questions. So I know that it's stated that it's $180,000 in Prop L funds with conditions to the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency, and appropriate $49,900 in Prop L funds with conditions. So I wanted to ask what the conditions are. And although it's only listing this amount of money, I just had a question regarding the whole Central Subway costing $2 billion overall. It's mind-boggling because we're in a budget crisis. So yeah, those are my questions. Thank you.
I'll speak to the first part on conditions. So that terminology refers to conditions, including pending, part of the request is approval of an amendment to some of the programmed fundings. And the other conditions are, for example, that SFMTA will return and present this as an informational item in the final report, and other conditions like that that are in the packet. With respect to the cost estimate, Jess, you want to speak to some of our learnings on that?
I just want to, thanks for the question, Member Margarita. Just to clarify, the approximately 1.9, without looking, I don't know what the next numbers are in that, but the about $1.9 billion cost of the Central Subway, those are completed costs to construct the project. Of that, the federal grant was on the order of about $950 million, I believe, and the rest was a combination of local and regional and state funds. We would expect that sort of funding mix of all levels of government and a significant federal commitment is what we would expect for any sort of subway project in San Francisco. And it is, for example, broadly the types of sources that are at play for the Portal project, the downtown rail extension, which is sort of the next large-scale urban subway project that's under development in San Francisco right now. I'm not sure if that addresses your question, but let me know.
Partially. So that's only covering what you have included. It wouldn't obviously cover anything, any other expansion of it.
Right. That is for the completed project to Chinatown with the sort of unfinished tunnel to North Beach that Mr. Heidel spoke to.
And we're dependent on the other funding including the federal government funding in order for the project to move forward, or is all of that approved?
The project itself does not have construction phase funding. The first step on the journey to securing money like that is continuing to advance the planning so that we can get a picture of the cost of various extension options and prepare, should the project move forward, to advance ultimately into the federal funding pipeline as well after the planning process and the countywide sort of prioritization process. So those are all future steps, but right now the project is not at the sort of complete funding plan level.
Thank you.
I might, Jesse, if I remember, Member Margarita, the next item is the Geary 19th subway, and there are other expansions. I'm sure you could just come up with your own transit expansion project. We need as a city to go through and prioritize, which ones go next. This is helping provide some more information for you and policymakers and MTA and everyone to think about that process.
So moving forward with it, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to happen because all the pieces have to connect overall in order for it to happen, correct? Safe to say?
It is safe to say that conducting this next phase of planning is not a guarantee that the project itself will be constructed, but it is a necessary step on the path towards considering advancing the project.
I really appreciate the explanation. Thank you.
A great tee up to the next item.
Member Ford?
The risk of repeating what we'll have to talk about with the next item. It looks in the packet that this is proposed because it is a cheaper, more achievable option. To what extent does this project overall as a goal have the political support to happen? Is this a study because it's incrementally not very expensive, so we might as well improve it, that just doesn't really have anywhere near the political capital behind it to get the funding, to get the people, to get the land, to get the coordination to actually happen? In which case, we could all save a bunch of time by just not, until we wait till a time where there is an appetite for this. So yeah, does Mayor Lori like this? Are Mayor Lurie and Connie Chan and Scott Wiener all joining hands to love the Central Subway? Where's the Rose Pack of this extension? Oh, and I used her name deliberately because there is a very good reason that station is named after her.
If I could...
You go ahead, Liz.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So one piece of context that wasn't covered in the introduction of this item is one of the impetuses for us to pick back up on this work of studying advancing the Central Subway extension was in response to a hearing that was held at the Board of Supervisors Land Use Committee back in January at the request of Supervisor Sauter. During that hearing, there was a huge number of people that showed up and said, yes, please extend the Central Subway, and chorus of points very similar to what you all have raised on both yes, I want the Central Subway to extend not just to North Beach, but to all these other locations. Expanding transit is so important. But we also heard a lot of people make comments I want it all those places eventually, but we have an unfinished tunnel and it would be incrementally so much less expensive and less disruptive to first extend it to North Beach just because there's already a tunnel there. And let's not wait forever to get the perfect multi-station extension if we could do something faster and cheaper in light of, the real resource constraints our city has. So the reason we wrote the scope the way that we wrote it is to put some more facts behind that hypothesis or that advocacy that we heard at the board meeting or at the hearing. So we want to put a price tag on what would it take to just do the extension to North Beach and then compare that to the approach of doing a one-station extension versus a further extension. I think this group understood, but just to make it really clear, the vision isn't that it would just and at North Beach, but that it may be a more, practical approach to do one more station and then a further extension as a subsequent phase. But we want to weigh the considerations duly, and that's one of the reasons the study scope is articulated as it is.
Member Milford Rosales.
So I'm significantly in favor of transit expansion. I also ride the T on a daily basis, and many of my friends call me the #1 T hater in San Francisco. When canvassing for Prop L in the Bayview, one of the #1 things that was brought up to me by residents there was how bad the service on the T is, and as a matter of fact, this is acknowledged by SFMTA by establishing the 15 bus to provide fast transit because the T cannot do that. Even just on the ride here today, I had a T that was delayed 5 minutes crossing the 4th Street Bridge with the disaster that's going on with traffic management there, and then was already at crush capacity before we entered the tunnel. If we're talking about expanding the T to an area that has high potential for ridership, this is more of a comment than a question, but I really believe we need to be pairing this with a plan to increase the frequency of service on the T. There are so many issues that are caused going down 3rd Street with the lack of transit priority, particularly with left turns, that also could use solving. But even before we're getting into stuff like that, like we already see incredibly packed trains that are pretty infrequent during rush hour right now. And if we're increasing the ridership, which we should do, we also need to be increasing the capacity to actually carry those riders. Because I can't imagine that there would be I can't imagine that there would be capacity right now during rush hour for people that want to commute between anywhere south of Market and North Beach. Obviously, everyone's getting off at Union Square, on and off at Union Square right now, or most people are, so that there's capacity just to connect to and from BART in that way. But if we're trying to actually have that service get used more than like 3 stations lengthwise on the route, we need more service. So I'd just like to ask that be considered and added into plans going forward. Thank you very much.
Member Margarita.
Yeah, the more I think about it, I'm just, because again, I keep on going to crunching the numbers and the money, and the $2 billion, I know it's not listed on this section right now, but the $2 billion is just like, kind of like ringing at my ears when we just need to improve what we have currently right now by adding more buses to that area. Even if we add, temporarily a 15 bus line, additional, drivers for that 15 bus line, I'm sure it'll be less than $2 billion. And, right now I'm not writing it in that area, but yeah, I used to go to the Sunnydale Boys and Girls Club, and it took forever to get the 15 to pick me up. And the population, the members of the community deserve to have the buses come by more often in that area, just like Member Rosales just stated. And I'm also thinking about the jobs that will be lost during the next couple years. Currently, the bus drivers of, SFMTA, et cetera, because of the budget crisis. And so I just feel like we need to invest in conserving. And I know one thing doesn't have to do with the other, but one thing does have to do with the other. So those are my 2 cents. Thank you.
Is there any public comment in the room on this item?
Thank you, Edward Mason. This project that we're talking about, that we're bidding on, we're discussing tonight, is just to do a study to construct subway. What you really need to do is also to have the logistics to maintain whatever is built. in simple terms, we're only talking tonight about the tip of the iceberg. What I'm talking about is the financial bottom of the iceberg to maintain this program. And it always gets glowing. We have to have this project, and I always reflect on what happened in Santa Clara County with the light rail system. It was all glowing that, oh, we're going to have light rail in Santa Clara County. And I attended the opening in '89. And guess what? It's a total failure. Goes up and down the subway, up and down 85, and no one rides it. The ridership is very low. The only time that you have any ridership on that is when you have a football game in there. So what we're doing here is a political project, and I look at it as, and the people behind it are really, it's a real estate development project to enhance real estate development in the area. But demographically, is it going to be worth it? Because demographically, the population is contracting. So you're not going to have that. So I really have reservations about spending more money, because a decade ago we had a study all the way to Fisherman's Wharf. We spent money there. We're going to spend some more money now. And it's just a perpetual hole in the ground that we're having to fund. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any remote public comment?
Going to our first remote caller. Howard, your 2 minutes begins now.
Hello?
Oh, we can hear you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Howard Wong, Save Muni. The Central Subway has been one of the largest contributors to Muni's budget deficits in the last few years. It's $2 billion cost, half of which was local and state funding. It's $400 million cost overrun. It's high annual operating costs, about $15 million a year, waterproof problems, low ridership, and generally false data that led to its construction. Subways take about 15, 30 years to build. In 15 to 30 years, transit technology will have been completely changed. Within the North Beach quadrant, northern quadrant, we already have about 41 distinct transit lines, more than any other section of the city, and probably more transit than any part of the United States. And we need to improve transit in the entire city, not just in the northeast quadrant. It's very unresponsible to continue to put money into one section of the city and then ignore the western and southern parts of the city, which are continuing to have their bus lines and service cut back so that we can fund expensive subways that have very little return for the money. Also, the northeastern area of the city is part of the waterfront flood resiliency plan. It needs to have its transit flood-proofed, not adding more.
Thank you for your comment.
Going on to our next caller. Gerald, your 2 minutes begins now.
Yes, this is Gerald Cawthon again of the Bay Area Transportation Working Group. I had a lot to do with the phase 2 of what we used to call the 3rd Street Light Rail project. Phase 1 was 3rd Street Light Rail. Phase 2 was the Central Subway extension into Chinatown. And you're now talking about what we used to say a possible extension beyond the terminal just north of Chinatown. First of all, nothing will ever happen unless a group takes over in Washington, D.C. that is so anxious to give out major federal grants that it loses all concern about the national debt and the tax rate. That's number one. So unless there's a change there in 2028 or later, we're not going to see anything. So Howard Wong made that point very well. I want to say one other thing. The MTA in its presentation of phase two was incredibly dishonest with its ridership projections, its capital costs, and its operating costs. I know for a fact that the amount in the original bond issue was 670 million and ended up being over 2 billion. I know that the original idea was it was going to save 13.7 million in operating costs a year. It's going to cost at least 15 million costs a year. And the ridership figures were originally at as high as 95,000 riders a day. It's now something like, including both the 3rd Street and the Central Subway, somewhere around, I think it's around 18 to 20,000 riders a day. Maybe I'm a little off, but not by much.
Thank you for your comment.
Going to our last caller. Tom, your 2 minutes begins now.
Okay, thank you. So first for the directors, I don't know the technical term, but who haven't had a chance to read the comment that I wrote in the public record, I thank those that have read it, and those who haven't, please take a look at that when you have time. I think that the study is a great idea, but it also should include not just North Beach, but North Beach and beyond, both the phase 3 and the phase 4 that were set forth in the T3rd concept study. Doesn't mean there's money to build it, but it should be studied as part of the alternatives, options, trade-offs, opportunities. And I would just also highlight that the T is actually the second highest usage. So it's not true that it doesn't have good ridership. It's second only to the Judah, and it's actually the second most ridden metro line in the system. And if you take the ridership together with the 45 and the 30, much of which all has to go through that choke point on Stockton Street, the ridership of those lines combined is actually higher than the 38 and the 38R lines. So there's a need to get people moving through here, particularly all the service workers that commute in. You see them on the buses that have to deal with this every day. They need a rapid transit option to get through to their jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. There is no more public comment.
Great, thank you. Can I ask really quickly, just because it was a theme in both public comment and in our discussion, how expensive would it be to expand the scope of the study to include other, like, would that require significantly more funding, or would it just be a change in direction?
Yes, sure. It would cost more money to study more things, significantly more, because if we there was an earlier phase of work that we were doing prior to the pandemic, and the engineering resources it takes even to do the very early level of drawing up conceptual alignments and conceptual stations is significant. One of the things that makes this study a little more easy is the tunnel is where the tunnel is. So we are going to look at potential station costs, but the station in North Beach can only go connecting to the existing tunnel. The other thing I'd note is if we were to expand the scope to look at alternatives of a fuller extension, that type of study would require significant public outreach, because we really would want to do that in partnership with all the affected neighborhoods. this study is scoped to have a much more limited phase of or amount of outreach because it's really a technical study to put a cost tag, a price tag, and a comparison around two paths forward for extending the subway. And so, yeah, we couldn't do all of that with the allocation amount that's under discussion tonight.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. Sure, Member Baumgarten.
Am I understanding correctly that the need for doing this study now and not utilizing the studies already done previously in like the phase 3 conceptual studies due to the need to get an updated price, or is there a structural difference and something that hasn't already been studied in those previous ones?
The previous studies didn't specifically study a single station extension to North Beach.
But am I wrong in understanding there was partially a study on include like in that initial build? Wasn't like the partial track in North Beach scoped?
So there was a study completed in 2014 called the concept study that came up with several conceptual alignments and station locations for extension through to Fisherman's Wharf. That study was done also as only a technical study without any outreach because it was kind of done in the context of the tunnel boring machines for the current Central Subway were working their way out, and there was a lot of pressure to essentially say, don't just take them out, let's plan the extension and keep using them. So, sorry, I'm trying to keep this concise for the purpose of tonight. Obviously,
honestly, that's
subway
okay.
stuff.
That answers sufficiently, I would say. I just wanted to ensure there wasn't like just double duty because it was like had been a while and it was like no longer inaccurate. I'm understanding now there's new information being surfaced. Okay, thank you.
Can I get a motion and a second to approve this item? Moved by Member Ford, seconded by Member Baumgarten. Madam Clerk, can we please get a roll call vote?
On the motion to approve item 11, Member Bars?
Bars, aye.
Bars, aye. Member Baumgarten?
Baumgarten, aye.
Baumgarten, aye. Vice Chair Daniels? Daniels absent. Member Ford?
Ford, aye.
Ford, aye. Member Kim? Kim absent. Member Laboro? Laboro absent. Member Levine? Levine absent. Member Margarita?
Nay.
Margarita, nay. Member Milford Rosales?
Milford Rosales, aye.
Milford Rosales, aye. Member Ortega?
Ortega, aye.
Ortega, aye. Chair Siegel?
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, aye. There are 6 ayes. The motion is approved.
All right, and thank you again for the presentation. We'll move on to item 12, adopt a motion of support to adopt the Geary 19th Avenue Subway and Regional Connection Study final report. And this item also received public comment, which has been posted to the website. And we have Principal Transportation Planner Andrew Heidel also to present this item.
Hello again for one final time this evening to present the Geary 19th Avenue Subway and Regional Connection Study final report. So I do want to highlight off the top before I dive into this presentation, the CAC received an informational update on this study at its February 2026 meeting. I recognize there are two new members this evening. We did share the study's background, purpose, goals, and initial findings there. For the benefit of new members, I'll step through some of that content, but pretty quickly. If you would like us to follow up with a briefing, to do. That presentation, the informational item I'm referring to, also kicked off our second round of outreach, which we were pleased to once again have a great response to with interesting thoughts and feedback from members of the community. So I'll be presenting a slightly abbreviated version of the full presentation to avoid duplicating material. Okay, so first a little bit of background. The concept of a subway under Geary Boulevard has been discussed for over 70 years, dating back to at least the original planning studies for the BART system in the 1950s. Since then, a number of studies and plans have consistently identified the need for better connection between the west side and downtown San Francisco. Throughout these studies, the needs of riders have been consistent: faster trips, less crowding, better connections, and maintaining a state of good repair for the system we have today. These years of work have also evolved our understanding of potential solutions. In this case, aligning a Geary subway with a new Transbay rail crossing in the east and along 19th Avenue towards a connection with San Mateo County in the south allows the project to act as a broader part of the regional East Bay to Peninsula connection while also serving parts of San Francisco that are not well connected to the regional transit network today. The current phase of work has picked up where the 2021 and 2022 studies, Transit Strategy and San Francisco Transportation Plan, left off, and has worked to refine the case for moving the Geary 19th Avenue subway forward while also developing a roadmap for next steps. Similar to what we were talking about in the prior item, planning for these kind of generational investments is a multi-year, multi-step process. To identify a preferred alternative, that is the actual routing of the subway, where station locations might go, what kind of trains would actually run in the subway, much more technical work than we were able to complete in this study, and community conversations will also need to happen. That's why we've started now with our current and initial phase, where we reconfirmed the case for the project and are laying out the roadmap through these future phases and steps. Our goal at the conclusion of each of these steps, these boxes represented on the screen, is to know enough to feel comfortable committing the resources needed to advance to each subsequent phase. And to be clear, we're not looking to draw those lines on a map or make decisions about a preferred alternative might be in this phase, nor have we done technical work or outreach that would allow us to do this. That will come in a following alternatives analysis and investment program prioritization phases. More on those in a bit. Before we go further, a critical issue that I do want to recognize we are facing today is the transit fiscal cliff. As members likely know, the San Francisco and the region are weighing how to bolster transit funding to address operating shortfalls later this year. In November 2026, San Francisco voters are anticipated to consider 2 ballot initiatives, including a 5-county regional measure as well as a local measure, that would provide operating funds for transit if approved. However, SFMTA and other Bay Area transit operators have initiated planning to consider potential operational, revenue, and efficiency strategies that could be pursued in the absence of new operating funds. In the case of SFMTA, about a quarter of Muni service could be eliminated. Regional transit agencies would also expect to make significant cuts to service by late 2027. To affect everyone who lives and works in San Francisco, and addressing transit agencies' operating funding needs is an important consideration in the context of ongoing planning any transit expansion projects. But as we just discussed, the planning, design, and funding of large projects like a new subway takes significant time. We see that advancing this work now is important to lay the groundwork for confirming our capital priorities and securing both local, regional, state, and federal funding that would be required in the future to deliver the project. Doing this work now is a long-term commitment to San Francisco and its transit first. I shared in our informational update, the study team developed a high-level framework for thinking about the benefits of building a Geary 19th Avenue subway. Just a quick refresher on those. First, up at the top, represented by the purple bus, how does the experience improve for travelers? Will this investment help make transit easier, faster, and more attractive for more trips? Second, understanding the growth that is planned for San Francisco, how can the project help both serve current needs and those that would arise from that growth? And we also ensure that the benefits to existing residents, including those who have been historically disadvantaged or excluded from planning processes like these, are shared equitably. And third, can the project make contributions to larger local, regional, and statewide goals that might be beyond the scope of any one single action, but require everything we do to move in the right direction? That framework in mind, we set out to identify what the key decisions that planners, engineers, community members, elected officials would likely need to make as the project advances. And importantly, what doors might be opened or closed by making those decisions. Reminder again, these are not decisions that will or can be made in this phase. We're just identifying an initial set of areas where there are clear options and asking for agreement that they are indeed key decisions so we can prepare to move forward. Those decisions and trade-offs are focused around key questions about regional connectivity. Should trains through run to other parts of the region, or should there be a passenger connection at one or both ends? In San Francisco, what areas are directly served by the subway? What might require a connection on surface transit? How do we transition from the east-west Geary Boulevard segment to the north-south 19th Avenue alignment? What does a tie-in or connection at or around Daly City look like at the southern end? And also, what technologies are on the table? So what types of trains, basically, for this investment? What are the implications for some of the questions above, as well as project phasing, cost, and locations of a maintenance and storage facility? We'll move now fairly quickly through the study findings, which are, again, substantially similar to what was presented in the February informational update. So to orient us, though, to understand the subway's potential benefits, we tested the key questions I just mentioned and more while identifying and exploring other considerations to understand what the subway project's range of benefits might be. We are happy to see improvements across all three of those major key areas. We also identified what we recommend in the final report as other critical building blocks to advance as part of or in parallel to additional project planning. Funding, land use, what other supportive policies can help maximize the benefits we see, and perhaps, as I'll talk about more in a moment, help pay for the project. First, the overall case for the project is and remains strong, or excuse me, promising, and has the potential to be an integral part of the regional and statewide rail system. The study recommends that San Francisco should continue to lead and advance planning for the project to prepare for the future, the knowledge that maximizing project benefits also creates opportunity to create value in time savings for travelers, the accessibility and value of land, and economic activity and productivity. That capturing and leveraging some of that value will be critical to underpinning the funding for the project, given its high capital cost. Moment. We also note there are trade-offs there. It's important to deliver benefits to existing residents and businesses while mitigating potential effects such as next, we've confirmed that regional connectivity broadens the size and geographic scope of benefits to travelers and communities. The project does perform well as a San Francisco-only subway, much better when it is integrated with the region's rail network. As an example, ridership analysis showed 160 to 180,000 riders per day on a San Francisco-only project, and up to 310,000 riders per day within a regionally connected project. These benefits increase not only for San Franciscans, but for travelers across the region. That same analysis showed that multiple design options can deliver benefits. As the project advances, clear input from community members is going to be important to balance with technical considerations, select routes and station locations. Project design decisions have the potential to drive ultimate cost of the project. We currently estimate that the full cost of the project is between $20 and $30 billion. In future phases, we will need to consider what project phasing might be. I talked about that a little bit in the previous item in the context of Central Subway. Considering if there is an additional segment that can deliver some of these benefits at a smaller cost while still planning for and anticipating the full build-out of the project. To our passenger experience, regional and statewide climate and equity goals, we found that the project moves the needle in the right direction in each of these versus a future where the project isn't built. And the good news is that our analysis also shows that the people who benefit the most are those that live in communities that have been historically disadvantaged or excluded from this type of projects. For example, access to jobs within 45 minutes on transit, so total number of jobs that average resident can access within a 45-minute ride on transit, for a resident of an equity priority community would increase 60% more than the average for all San Franciscans. 76,000 new jobs within 45 minutes for the average equity priority community resident versus 47,000 for the average San Franciscan as a whole. Existing funding sources are not enough to fund a project of this size, so we'll need to think creatively about new places to look for funding. I talked earlier about the project delivering value in terms of travel time, land value, and economic activity. So are there ways to recoup a meaningful portion of that value to contribute to the project? These and other sources, again, are likely to be competitive, meaning that we should look to make decisions that maximize project performance and minimize costs. Drawing a connection or nexus between the value that the subway project would deliver and potential sources of funding will be important. But San Francisco, the Bay Area, and the state of California have a history of developing innovative funding approaches in order to make generational investments in our transportation system. Some of the examples of these potential methods are on the screen here. For example, are there ways to create a win-win by reducing vehicle congestion and funding transit improvements through a road user charge, as has seen success in New York and Chicago? We explore methods like a benefit district or joint development to bring some of the expected increase in land value back to the project, as was done to the Salesforce. None of these ideas, though, are certain at this point, but it's important to further develop these options as the project moves forward and to understand where certain techniques can play a role in making the subway a reality. Finally, moving the project forward will require a mix of robust community input alongside technical development, planning, and engineering to inform our project choices. Continued engagement and support from community stakeholders, and importantly, active outreach to people who may not be able to attend events like these or our open houses is going to be critical. So the study team recommends a set of next steps to continue to advance the project and planned project development and planning for the subway. Now, new content that was not in the February informational item. So as I mentioned earlier, the Geary 19th Avenue subway is one of 5 major rail and transit enhancements identified in the Connect SF Transit Strategy and the 2050 San Francisco Transportation Plan that we just discussed. Others, Central Subway. Each of those projects will require substantial funding to advance from concept to final construction and to delivery. At this point in the project development cycle, the responsible agencies have the capacity to advance that initial planning for multiple efforts in parallel. So in parallel to the proposed next step for the Geary 19th Avenue subway that I'll talk about in a moment, that Central Subway extension from its current terminus was the subject of our previous agenda item. While the Connect SF Transit Strategy and the 2050 San Francisco Transportation Plan laid out the initial concepts for each project, plans did not prioritize the order in which major transit expansion projects should advance or be implemented. Project prioritization is planned to be considered through the next major update to the San Francisco Transportation Plan, following SFCTA, we expect to kick off next year. That plan will use updated information about each project's performance, as well as other effectiveness and readiness criteria, including public policy support, local and regional financial commitment to make recommendations regarding how San Francisco's full vision for long-range transit and rail expansion should advance. I mentioned earlier the Geary 19th Avenue subway and regional connection study. What we're talking about here today is the initial step of a multi-year process by which major transit capital investment is planned, environmentally cleared, designed, constructed, and eventually opened for passenger service. Because major transit capital projects are complex undertakings involving many stakeholders, varied interests, and multiple approvals, it typically takes at least 15 to 20 years to progress from project initiation through revenue service. Moving through each stage of project development also requires the availability and commitment of funding to undertake the next stage of work, along with strong community and political support. Next broad phase of project development for the Geary 19th Avenue subway would be an alternatives analysis stage, in which conceptual alignments, stations, and technologies are defined. The completion of a full alternatives analysis stage for the subway is estimated to require approximately $10 to $15 million, depending on the number of alternatives to be explored and the level of engineering design to be prepared. To advance the Geary 19th Avenue subway project and to provide input into that project prioritization process I just talked about, the study team has identified an initial set of prioritized alternatives analysis tasks to be advanced with the near-term funding in the range of approximately $1.5 million or up to $3 million if the project is successful in securing competitive regional funding in the near term. The scoping process for this next phase of work is still underway, including with agency partners. An appropriation of additional funds to continue project development would be the subject of future board action. That concludes my brief presentation this evening. Once again, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Are there any questions or comments from members? Member Bars.
So about the painted bike lanes. No, I'm kidding. It's late. I'm sorry. No, thank you for the presentation, Mr. Heidel. That was really great. It's late, and I appreciate you sticking it out to the end. I just want to say I am very supportive of this project. I was taking the opportunity to familiarize myself with the family zoning plan map, and this project, I believe, would be really critical to making that work on the west side and in District 7. So I'm really very happy to see this move forward. I have a question, which is a little political in nature, sort of inspired by Member Ford's question to the previous item. Would this project be pitted against or have to compete for money with the project we just heard about?
I think it's a great question. And as we pointed out in the presentation, I think where we're at right now, that we have both staff and fiscal capacity to advance these. We're not fully in parallel right at the moment, but to continue to evolve our understanding, refine our cost estimates, our picture of benefits as we head into the next future update for the San Francisco Transportation Plan that will kick off in 2027. We anticipate using that effort as the opportunity to start to prioritize what those investments were. The four recommendations from the last SFTP. The fifth is the portal, which is obviously much further along than the rest. Erie 19th subway, Central subway, Bayview Station in the Caltrain, and the new Transbay Rail crossing, which BART Capital Corridor are advancing separately as Link 21. So thinking about what will we know about each of those projects as we head into our next countywide transportation plan will help us answer that question about what's those key criteria around project readiness, funding competitiveness, community and political support are all going to play into part of that.
Okay, that is very helpful. So we're doing this study in part to see how each of these mega projects kind of shake out. And that means feasibility of the idea, political and technical, and getting a real sense of what the support is like from the city and from the neighboring communities. Is that correct?
I think that's a fair characterization. I think the individual efforts will help understand that, and then the San Francisco Transportation Plan is intended to bring it all together and really try to make the most apples to apples comparison that we can across.
That's very helpful. Okay, then I know $20 to $30 billion feels like an awful lot of money, but I'm going to bring up the Elizabeth Line project in London, which I've brought up before in the context of this, which is to say that there's a great book about it. I read it recently, highly recommended reading. And it talked that one of the key stats was that something like 40% of the funds put directly into that project came directly, or not directly, but came back to or state coffers, in this case, United Kingdom, right, via all of the jobs and work created. So while 20 to 30 billion looks like a big amount of money to spend on a valuable piece of infrastructure, if you think that maybe half of it is coming right back in the form of paying people's wages and getting taxes back, to me, it is not the cost estimate doesn't tell the whole story about the nature of the investment. That said, I just wanted to say that for my fellow colleagues here, that these mega projects, it's not just dollars spent and they go down the drain. They come back and they stay in the economy. And it would be a big win for San Francisco to get to do all of these. The one that we just heard, this one, Link 21, all of them. Oh boy, it'd be awesome for our economy. Better than the AI bubble. Okay, so now I will get off the mic. We are very late, but my request, and this is, I think, maybe a slight departure from what we do with these big planning studies, but really my hope, I think it is as important to be as analytical about the benefits as it is about the costs. And I'm seeing a lot of really good work in trying to measure what the likely cost is, and also providing a very good range as to the cost to give ourselves a lot of room as we figure it out. But I think that's just as important to have things like, this is the number of people we're going to help, right? And having that sort of, that politically, I think, gets to be important, especially when you start to have arguments about the number of stations along a line or the number of connections you make, or whether or not you do go to Daly City BART, right? The decisions of ridership is not just a number, it's human beings whose lives are made better by a service. And I think my colleague Milford Rosales' comments about the T, clearly it's served a need, but it doesn't serve the whole promised need in the fact that it's so slow through the Bayview. And I just would hate to lose sight of trying to really measure and understand those benefits too soon. That's it. Thank you.
Member Margarita.
Thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate it. I just, again, the amount of money that is going to be spent, I understand the investment and innovation, et cetera, in the long run, but in the short term, I question the equity benefits because who's going to be cut right now as workers due to the budget crisis? Have there been an analysis regarding occupational segregation, which I think is essential to address the workforce that's going to be affected by the jobs that are cut from SFMTA, and how hard these families have worked and possibly invested in buying houses, et cetera. So the equity argument, I think we need to really look at that analysis and also invest in improving the safety versus kind of like innovation and the prettiness of what it's going to be, and accessibility of, 20-minute access versus 40-minute access. When we have so many things to work on right now with regards to safety of pedestrians and bike riders and just what we have right now. San Francisco is such a beautiful city, and we have, I think, humbly I say this, one of the best transportation services that I've witnessed, and this is including in Europe and Mexico and other countries, et cetera. And I keep on coming back to just kind of preserving what we have and really improving the safety of the people who are walking, the pedestrians, the bike riders, versus investing $20 to $30 billion on the prettiness and accessibility of it. I think that we just need to rethink it and really look at the equity access for all of the workers and people who would benefit right now versus later in the future. Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation. I just wanted to say I think that seems very thorough and thoughtfully presented, and I appreciate the discussion of value capture. I think that's going to be really important if any version of this moves forward. Also appreciate that there is an alternatives analysis suggested as a next step. I hope that includes both as an alternative and as a possible incremental step to build support and infrastructure, discussion of just what it would look like to massively increase service on the 38 and the 28, and just like what of these benefits do we get from that? I know that they would be different, but due to the concerns about cost and all of that, what can we do with what we have? Assuming more operational funds. All right. Is there any public comment in the room on this item? Not seeing any. Is there any remote public comment?
Yes, going to our first caller. Roland, your 2 minutes begins now.
Yes, thank you. And I share your pain about the costs and what you get out of it. And I was going to actually follow up on what Liz Bryson said earlier about, when you were looking at the Central Subway extension, and you all know about the RAB. Some people figured out the RAB about 18 months before the RAB actually started. And then you ended up spending tens of millions of dollars coming to, oh yeah, maybe that was the right solution. And then Link 21, I don't know if you know this, but BART wasted $130 million on consultants, or what is essentially is just doodling, without any engineering behind it. Now, the good news is that in Santa Clara, especially in Palo Alto, in San Jose, we've got a bunch of residents who have been studying tunnels for decades, and who are recognized as basically producing, better suggestions than so-called subject matter experts. And what you really need to start looking at is starting some kind of grassroots movement, because I'm quite sure you got people like that in San Francisco, just like what we have in the South Bay. And I would like to give you a plug for Rod Diriden's widow. I forgot what her name is, who mentioned it last week. That's something that her husband always wanted to do. And she's actually trying to start that kind of movement, believe it or not, in San Francisco. So why don't you, loop around with her, see what she's trying to do, and maybe, she can help you out with projects like the Central Subway or Geary or whatever. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Going to our next caller. Hi, Howard. Your 2 minutes begins now.
Thank you. Howard Wong, Save Muni. We do need to study other transformative new technology in transit. And it doesn't require a long-term study. It can be incorporated into our existing systems, as many, many other cities have done, because transit technology is changing rapidly. AI and digital management of transit, streets, traffic, congestion. We have already, in some cities, automated trackless trains that run on streets with embedded sensors in the street. Think of a multiple train running down Geary that can be built within a few years, not 15 to 20 or 30 years. We need transit that's transformative in our lifetime that benefits our citizens as soon as possible. And that also includes microbuses that run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, could be automated, on demand, last minute transit. We have, even things like automated train control systems or communications-based train control systems. San Francisco, after spending billions and billions of dollars over the last decades, has actually had declining transit modal share of all trips. That's a pretty bad statistic. I think we can spend those $1 billion better in transit that helps us today. By the way, the Central Subway has extremely low ridership in the Union Union Square stations, Chinatown, and Yerba Buena stations. Its T-line is high ridership to Chase Center, but not.
Thank you for your comment.
There is no additional public comment.
Great. Can I get a motion and a second on this item? Moved by Member Bars, seconded by Member Baumgarten. Madam Clerk, could we please get a roll call vote?
On the motion to approve item 12, Member Bars.
Bars, aye.
Bars, aye. Member Baumgarten.
Baumgarten, aye.
Baumgarten, aye. Vice Chair Daniels. Daniels absent. Member Ford.
Ford, aye.
Ford, aye. Member Kim. Kim absent. Member Laboro. Laboro absent. Member Levine. Levine absent. Member Margarita.
Margarita, nay.
Margarita, nay. Member Milford Rosales.
Milford Rosales, aye.
Milford Rosales, aye. Member Ortega.
Ortega, aye.
Ortega, aye. Chair Siegel.
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, aye. There are 6 ayes. The motion is approved.
Great. Thanks again for the presentation. Move on to introduction of new business. Do any CAC members have any new business? Member Milford Rosales.
I'll keep this brief since it's late and I'm being a bit of a broken record, but since I was last here for a meeting, we have passed the 100-day mark of Mayor Leary's Street Safety Executive Directive, and the only visible item that has come through has been the high visibility enforcement actions, which started with ticketing cyclists rolling through lights on Market. We had a community meeting in April dealing with the fatality and car crash a few blocks from my apartment in Mission Bay, Soma area, and there was no process in place. That this order, which had already hit the 100-day mark, called for all these process involvements for how to communicate to neighbors about street changes that could happen. It called for having priority daylighting, all these things in place. None of that was happening in our neighborhood. It was very clearly a slapdash, listening to the community and talking at the community about how they didn't know what to do, but they were working on it. And he's been in office for 1 1/3 years, and we have yet to hear any kind of plan on what Vision Zero is supposed to look like. So I'd really appreciate if we could get someone from his office to come and talk to us about what they're doing.
Do any other CAC members have any new business? Is there any public comment in the room on new business? Not seeing any. Is there any remote public comment on new business?
There is no remote public comment.
Great. Then we'll move on to item 14, public comment. This is general public comment on items under the Transportation Authority CAC's purview that are not otherwise agendized at this meeting. It looks like we have public comment in the room.
Thank you, Edward Mason. I'd like to bring up observations regarding the corporate commuter buses. The new work week seems to be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Mondays and Fridays, the observation is the buses are running, but no one is getting on and using them. So consequently, I kind of reflect back on what happened a decade ago with the County Transportation Authority here running the survey through CHAMP, saying that Muni said, their survey said 50% of the riders would drive. Well, if you take that, and that was the justification for the program. So now they're not driving because they're not on the bus. They're not working. They're working from home or the new work week. And consequently, I have to come to the conclusion that these buses are really a net generator of pollution now because there's nobody on the bus. And, it's a real conundrum here that we do this for the convenience of the patrons and also the fact that they don't live where they work, which is the premise of Plan Bay Area 2050. So just wanted to let you know that there's a considerable downturn in the patronage on these buses, and the buses are running and polluting the pollution and also contributing to the cost of fuel because they're consuming the fuel in the big picture. So I'll leave that for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Operator, is there any remote public comment?
Going to remote public comment. Roland, your 2 minutes begins now.
Thank you. And I want to give you a very brief update on what's going on with the high-speed rail and the authority in particular. So about 3 weeks ago, they released the 2026 business plan, and it was heard during a hearing of the Senate Transportation Committee, and it was rejected unanimously. It was a bipartisan vote, because they raised the cost between LA and San Francisco from $133 to $231 billion. I repeat, $231 billion. The next day, the governor fired both the chair, who was a Fresno developer, and the vice chair of the authority, and replaced them with former staffers when he was mayor of San Francisco. The first one is Jason Elliott, who you may know because he was on the CTC. And the other one is Steve Calmer, which former Supervisor Peskin used to refer as the most powerful individual in San Francisco that nobody's ever heard of. So but you may or may not have heard of it. So the conclusion right now is it looks really like high-speed rail is coming to the Trans-Bay Terminal at least a decade before it gets anywhere near Bakersfield. And last point, on Monday morning at 9:30 a.m. in Sacramento, I guess the rest of the world is going to find out who the next chairman of the authority is going to be and what's going to happen next. Thank you, and have a nice weekend for the rest of the week. Thank you.
Thank you. There is no additional public comment.
Great, thank you so much. That puts us on item 15, which is adjournment. Thank you all. This meeting is now adjourned.